properly online soon. But to the best of my recollection, we've got some updates. Oh, actually, hold on a second. Let me.
I can bring it up to if you want me to.
I don't have the ability to see it, to view it on my phone. So hold on a second. Let me just find the last email. I'm vamping for time. Okay. So this evening's meeting, I'm gonna start with some updates and announcements. We'll have our usual programming updates from cultural and Friends of Parks organizations. I'm gonna ask people to keep their comments really brief, try to do it in a minute. Jennifer Hoppe is going to make some quick announcements about upcoming parks events, but since there aren't any meaningful updates on capital projects since our last meeting, we're going to dispense with that particular update. And if people have questions about parks operations things, I encourage them to reach out to Jennifer directly. She will remind people of her email address so that they can be in contact with her. But since we have two really big presentations with a lot of public interest, and I expect a fair amount of public dialogue, I want to really get to those two agenda items. And they are the presentation on the proposed renovation of the West 186th Street basketball project, and then the Hudson River waterfront reconstruction at Dyckman Street. So I'd really like to be able to give each of those projects an hour. And I think that people get tired if a meeting runs too much over 2 hours. So I would like to very much not have this meeting run quite that long. So in terms of updates, I want to just let people know that the Ann Loftus Playground reopened and it's fantastic. If you haven't had the opportunity to check it out, I encourage you to do so. There will possibly be a reopening event in the spring that can loop in some of the neighborhood kids, but we wanted the Parks Department wanted to reopen the playground as soon as possible so that they could demo the wonderful new water feature before the water had to be cut off for in preparation for winter. So the playground is open, but of course the water feature is obviously not available because who uses a water feature in November? We had the capital and expense budget priorities rankings. I haven't yet received the full board rankings, so I don't have the ability to share that with you at this time. Hopefully I can share that with you at the next meeting. I don't have any particular updates on the Haven Avenue ramp. I've been out of town, so I didn't have the opportunity to circle back with Ebenezer on what happened at the last district services cabinet meeting, but I hope to be able to update folks next month. We have not yet heard from the Parks Department on a project timeline for the Fort Washington Park Pathways and Benches project. There are no updates on the Henry Hudson Fort Washington Park Greenway repairs. That work is, I don't have an update on that. And our December meeting, we had, the committee was originally proposing to meet at the United Palace. I'm hoping to still be able to do that for our December meeting, which will be Tuesday, December 8th. But again, I don't know, I'm sorry, and by Tuesday, December 8th, I meant actually Tuesday, December 13th. That would be the second Tuesday, December 13th. We are going sort of month by month on whether or not we will be resuming in-person meetings. And when we do resume in-person meetings, they will be hybrid. So there will be the opportunity to participate virtually if you are not able to attend in person. But all of this is subject to the governor's executive order and now the mayor's executive order on whether or not we are required to meet in person. So every time the mayor extends his executive order, we are able to continue to meet virtually. And we don't know, those executive orders get extended pretty much at the last minute. So each time we think we might be returning to in-person meetings, if the executive order gets renewed, we then continue with virtual meetings, and we don't control that. So I understand that it's a little bit chaotic, and I apologize for that, but I just want to be clear. It's not that we are disorganized and trying to make things difficult for the public. It's that we too are subject to a fair amount of chaos and not really knowing what are the executive orders and legislative particularities of rules for public meetings. So it keeps changing, and we have to be flexible in terms of our scheduling. So I apologize for that, and just encourage you to watch your email, watch your inboxes, and pay attention to whatever are the latest updates, and to understand that venues and whether or not things are in person, in addition to, if they're hybrid or if they are only on Zoom, is subject to change. So with that, are there any questions? Hello?
Jennifer has a question, Liz, because I know you might not be able to see the camera.
Correct.
I mean, the stack.
Right. I cannot see what the stack is. So who is it that has a question?
Jennifer Hopper.
Yes. Okay. So if you can unmute Jennifer so she can ask.
Oh, Liz, I just wanted to say the Fort Washington bike path work has started.
Oh, okay, great. And do you have and my recollection is that was going to be like a 3 or 4 month project in closure?
Yep, the 181st Street pedestrian bridge will remain open, and you can use it to head downtown or to come uptown from south of there.
Okay. And when did it start?
November 7th.
December, January, February, March. So we anticipated it'll be completed like the beginning of March.
I'd say for the spring, yeah, depending on weather.
Okay.
Okay. And the East Side Greenway remains open from Dykeman Street southbound to 155th Street, and that's off-road.
Okay. Cool. All right. Great. Give me a second. My computer has decided that it's finished installing these updates. So hang on just a moment. I'm in a meeting. I have to call you back. Sorry about that. All right. While I'm firing up my computer, I see that we've got Stephanie Caban with a hand up, which is good because that brings us to our next agenda item, which is updates. So Stephanie, you want to, can you, Paola, can you unmute Stephanie?
All they have to do is unmute them.
Okay. Stephanie, you want to unmute and give your report?
Sorry, had trouble with that. Hi, this is Stephanie. I'm from Riverside Park. Just had a quick question. I went to the Fort Washington tennis courts today with the Riverside Conservancy Tennis Association. And we were just looking at just the things that generally need to be done in tennis courts. There's a lot of deep cracks and fencing repairs that need to happen. And I was just wondering if that was on the radar of parks. So this might be a Jennifer question, or if we need to connect offline about this. I know that this is a pretty heavy agenda meeting. So yeah, I just wanted to let everyone know that yeah, also just want to kind of know a little bit more about the tennis courts at Fort Washington, and also trying to create a volunteer-led user group for that, because it seems like we get a lot of people from the hospital at 165th who come in, doctors and nurses who also utilize that tennis court. So trying to get a little bit more community outreach done for that area. I know it's hard to access, but we do get a lot of people who come. So yeah, if there are any updates about the tennis courts, they do need to be repaved heavily, and probably need to work with Amtrak for that. Fencing, the fencing lines as well. Was just wondering if there were any updates, and if not, maybe I can connect with someone offline.
Sure, I would recommend connecting with John Harold. He's the administrator for that part of Fort Washington Park. And probably does both the short-term and the long-range capital project planning for it.
Perfect.
He's currently the interim. I think he has also served in the past as the Riverside Park Conservancy head.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much, Jennifer. But yeah, that's all that's happening up there. So.
Okay. Is there, wait a minute, I think I'm connected in two places.
I think you are, Liz.
Liz, you have to turn off your phone so there's no echo.
Yep, that's what I'm working on. All right, I think I'm only attending in one place now. Yes?
Sounds good.
Fantastic. All right, sorry for that little bit of chaos. Just when you think you've got everything all organized, your computer decides to reboot. Nothing I could do. Okay, do we have other organizations that would like to give a report? I just saw a hand up a moment ago, and now it's, here we go. Julie McCoy, hit it.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So a couple of different things, and I'll be brief. So short thing is, I'm now the Commodore of the Inwood Canoe Club, effectively president of the club's board. We still have the same treasurer and secretary. We have a new fleet captain, and we still have the same vice commodore. Just quick bullet points on updates since the last CB12 Parks and Culture meeting. So first of all, we're glad that we can be here and present this information. The water is too cold right now, but we are working on land opportunities for the public and for prospective members. We've had great success this past year in the spring and the fall with shoreline cleanups. We had one on October 29th, where we coordinated with Word Up Community Bookshop and the Uptown Movement. We also want to congratulate our friends at the Hudson River Community Sailing. After a successful season, they had a regatta, and we were able to help them out celebrating that. And also, we worked together on the Heroes on the Hudson project back in August, where the two clubs worked to help basically wounded soldiers from the VA hospital come and have a good experience on the water. We have a group called Uptown Paddling, which is our nonprofit affiliate, looking for community partners for single session youth paddling. Essentially, we have boats in a boathouse. You have a group. We would love to let you bring your group to a hosted activity. And we also want to say we are grateful to the Office of Carmen De La Rosa for providing a discretionary grant to help support some of Uptown Paddling's community outreach. As always, you can find us at inwoodcanoenyc.org. That is the club's website. You can also email inwoodcanoe@gmail.com. That will get to our general purpose inbox. That's my report.
Sounds good. Can you do me a favor and just send me that?
Absolutely.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
Mancita's with us, Liz, but I think you can.
Okay, that's good. We still need one more for quorum. But welcome, Mancita. Thank you so much for dialing in. Hi, welcome. Julie, if you can send Stephanie Caban some more information about the waterfront cleanup. Her email is Stephanie, STEPHANIE at riversideparknyc.org.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Liz.
My pleasure. That's my favorite part about these meetings is like putting people together. So excellent. All right, next up we've got Rosa Yolanda Pineda. I'm just looking for, there we go. From Conectémonos.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. Thanks, Liz, for the opportunity. So Conectémonos have been, as part of It's My Park Day, we've been planting bulbs primarily at High Bridge from 189 from 188 to 193rd. This past Saturday, we have Commissioner Christopher Perez giving an award to the officers, to the family of the officers that were killed in January. And I'm referring to Officers Rivera and Mora. And Perez presented the Social Justice Healing Award to the family, where we use planting as a healing tool. In that area, we started planting as a healing tool back in the fall of 2020, when we invited families that lost one to COVID-19 to come and plant there. So we are grateful for the support that the Parks Department and Jennifer have provided. And a pine was identified at the family. It was a very moving event. So thanks to the Parks Department. Jennifer, Carlos has been fantastic, and the Commissioner Perez for being there to present the award. Thank you. And Liz, you know I'm thankful for all the support that you give us as well.
Thank you. Well, we are incredibly grateful for all of the work that you do. You know, we rely on you, people like you, groups like yours, to just increase the vitality of all of our parks. So thank you for all that you do. And I know that we're going to be hearing a lot from you in the next presentation. Next up, we have Barbara, who I believe is going to talk a little bit about what's happening at the ring.
Yes, I just want to say that December 3rd, we have our annual holiday tree lighting and menorah lighting, and Mr. and Mrs. Claus will be present. Well, they've said they're coming down from the North Pole to visit, and it's always a wonderful affair. Tryon Pub is donating hot cocoa and tea and some treats, and many people have come before, so you know what it is. I believe it's our 35th or 40th tree lighting, so please come December 3rd. People start to come about 4 o'clock and goes on for a while. So please come Saturday, December 3rd. That's it.
Cool. Thank you so much. It's always a great event. So anybody who's attended it knows that it's a lot of fun. Anybody who hasn't attended it, it's a lot of fun. You should go. Next up, we've got Leslie Henry, who wants to share a little bit of information about participatory budgeting in City Council District 7. Many of the ideas contributed involve New York City parks. Leslie, feel free to unmute yourself and give us a little bit of an update, although please limit your comments to whatever are the projects in District 7, which are part of Community Board 12. Hello?
Unmuted. There I
Okay,
am, I believe. The
Yes.
host would like you to unmute. Yes, I would like to. Thank you. Okay, so this is my first year as a budget delegate, and the submission of ideas from residents has closed, and there has been some very top level initial filtering of ideas as to ones that were obviously not appropriate for participatory budgeting, and then all the others are still there. However, Monday is the deadline for the submission of those ideas for which you want city agencies to do any vetting. It's not the final or the picks, but it's, it's like round, I don't know, sweet 16 or something of the double of the tournament.
okay. And which are the projects within the 7th
parks.
City Council District that relate to parks in CD12? Because keep in mind, the 7th City Council District is only the southern portion of Community Board.
Right. Well, right at 165th Street, which is the northernmost
Yes.
borderline of District 7 for the City Council, and I have learned now it's also for the Community Board, is a
No,
dog run.
The Community Board goes to 155th Street.
Oh, okay.
So
Oh,
anything in that 10 block
oh,
is going to be CB12. So what you got?
wait a second. Now I'm confused. 55 to 60, is 165 within your purview?
So Community Board 12 goes as far south as 155th Street.
All right,
And
I got
City
it.
Council District 7 goes as far north as 165th Street. So
Okay,
pretty much anything between 155 and 165 is an overlap of the 7th Council District and the 12th Community Board.
got it. Got it. Okay, so I've attended an agency briefing, and some of the other ideas are basically improving lighting. I've had an initial talk with all budget delegates, had an opportunity to speak to Steve Simon of the Parks Department, and I also spoke to Danielle Livingston. I think that's right. The issue is, of course, it's Parks Department property, but there's some sort of handshake going on with DOT because if they're doing the lighting.
And this would be
And-
lighting where?
Along between 150, what road is that? It's is it 158? Basically, it's between Riverside, let's just say Riverside at 160, that's the easiest, I think, up to 165.
Great.
Yeah, increasing lighting, trash cans, etc., but having it focus on pedestrian path. Then furthermore, adding lighting and signage. So this would be within Riverside or Fort Washington Park, and it would be having some signs so that if someone is in an emergency situation, they would be able to give a clear location to a rescuer, and so those were the main ones
Great.
for lighting and parks. I mean, for parks.
Super.
And-
Thank you so much. I appreciate the report.
Okay.
And thank you for your work as a PB delegate. It's a lot of work, as I know you're finding out. So thank you for
Yeah.
signing up for that.
And fast.
And I hope that even though it's a lot of work, I hope that you do it again, because my guess is there's probably a bit of a learning curve. So I've never done this particular piece of civic engagement, but I'm guessing that the second time you do it is probably easier than the first time. So
Luckily, there are some veterans
excellent.
on that I can learn from.
Excellent. But I'm thinking, like, if you say to yourself, whoo, this was too much work, I ain't doing this again. This is the second time around, it's probably a little bit easier. So
Okay.
thank you for your public service. Barbara, is that an old hand up? Okay, great. All right, and then last, seeing no more hands last, I just have a quick report from Martin Collins, who asked me to share some information about NOMA. He was not able to attend this evening because, yay, NOMA has resumed Thursdays with NOMA. So, of course, this committee usually meets on Tuesdays, but we are meeting this evening because of the Election Day holiday on Tuesday. So I'm not sure how long this season's run of Thursdays with NOMA will be, but I encourage you to tune in. The Graham Uptown, a social media photo exposition with exhibition with 60 artists at NOMA's gallery, produced by the Uptown Collective and NOMA. Gallery hours are Tuesdays and Saturdays from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. or by appointment. The exhibit is on through Saturday, January 14th. The NOMA Gallery is at 4140 Broadway in the United Palace. For more information, visit their website, which is www.nomaanyc.org. After tonight's meeting, you can check out their Thursdays with NOMA program, which is available on their website. Meet Ibtisam Tasneem Zaman, a multidisciplinary feminist and self-taught artist. The hybrid program airs at 7:30 p.m. and will be archived on NOMA's website. Her work draws inspiration from Persian Islamic geometric art, Indian classical art, surrealism, and magical realism. I am not familiar with this artist, but there hasn't been a single Thursdays with NOMA program that was not interesting and inspiring. So I encourage you to check it out. And if you have, any questions about NOMA's programming, again, hit their website, nomanyc.org. Seeing no other hands, I'm going to kick it over to Jennifer to give us some announcements about upcoming parks projects.
Great. First off, I just want to invite everyone, the Parks Department and community and civic leaders and members of the community board will be gathering Sunday, November 13th at noon along Payson Avenue. We're going to honor and celebrate Sally Fisher, who's the founder of the Friends of Inwood Hill Park. And we'll be having a ceremonial tree planting and gift giving in her honor. That's Sunday at noon. There'll be a light reception following it. Then at 2 p.m., the Rangers are going to meet us at Payson and Beak and lead us on a geology tour, which will end at 3 p.m. In a dance project based on geology by Kinesis and an Inwood resident, Melissa Riker.
Is a geology-based dance project a first?
A first?
Yeah,
Probably.
I love that. Sorry.
It's about crackling, so it's not just about geology. Yeah. So please join us to honor Sally. She's had a tremendous impact on this community. She's so dedicated. She's incredibly passionate, and she's poured herself out into our open spaces and beyond. So please come out and help us celebrate and honor her. We've got a street tree care stewardship event tomorrow, 10 a.m. If you want to be with the stewardship division, we've got on Saturday, there's a fall foliage hike with the Rangers. On Saturday, we also have the Fort Tryon Park Trust is having an arachnids program, and you can meet a real tarantula at the Fort Washington Terrace at Fort Tryon Park at 1 p.m. The Rangers are doing a night hike on Sunday at 5 p.m. And we've got a forest walk on Sunday also with naturalist Ken Chaya of the Northeast Forest and Laurel Hill Terrace. Next week, we're having botanical embroidery with artist Jessica Mafia at the J. Hood Wright Rec Center. There's a Highbridge Water Tower tour if you haven't made it yet, also on the 19th at 1. And then the Rangers are doing a post-Thanksgiving super hike after Thanksgiving, Harlem to Highbridge super hike. And last but not least, the Rangers are doing a Native American Heritage Month program about the Lenape of Mannahatta on the 27th. All of these programs can be found at northernmanhattanparks.org and click on events, all the details.
Thank you. If you've got a quick synopsis of that you can send me for the minutes would be fantastic. As you see, I am multitasking. Okay.
I just also want to remind people that we are still finding rabies. The Department of Health baited, but please remind your friends and neighbors to keep dogs on leash because raccoons and skunks have the potential to carry rabies, and we'd hate for anyone's dog to get it. Thank you.
Okay. So 7 p.m. I'm sorry, 7:07 p.m. I want to move the agenda to the West 186th Street basketball. And I'm going to invite Laura. Laura, how do you pronounce your last name?
Oh, it's easy. Drawbaugh.
Drawbaugh. Okay.
Yeah.
So before I turn it over to you, I just want to briefly recap for people who may not be familiar with this. The West 186th Street basketball courts are on the footprint of what had been a building that was taken down, I guess, after a fire. This would be in like the 70s. The Parks Department, it had been HPD's, and eventually it was turned over to the Parks Department. It was made into half-court basketball. It's an incredible facility. It really has helped to nurture a neighborhood. It's very well used and beloved. That's the good news. The bad news is it's just the surface is terrible, that needs subsurface work. It's pitted, it's cracked, it's got drainage problems, it's a broken ankle waiting to happen. Many people in the community have been clamoring for the repairs. It's expensive to do, and the city council member at the time, Idanis Rodriguez, committed a substantial amount of money for the repairs, and we're grateful to him for that. We are grateful to his successor, Carmen De La Rosa, for continuing to champion this project. With her leadership, with the Parks Department, we had a great public scoping meeting on Zoom that was extremely well attended, and that was happening with participation at multiple venues, including, I believe, a barber shop, and I think it was her office or a senior center, or we had like various venues where people were, so that folks who didn't have internet capability were still able to participate on the Zoom. We had a really great meeting, robust discussion, lots of good public input, on the basis of which Laura and her team are able, have put together a proposed plan, which we will hear about in a moment. I know that one of the things that was really important to people was to do something with the murals, to preserve the murals that are there, and perhaps, I don't want to say renovate, that's not the right word for art, but those murals are on the side of the adjacent building, and they're not actually Parks Department's property. So I'm hoping that the Parks Department is, willing to work with the community and with the landlord of the building, if he, she, they, it, I don't know if it's a corporation or a person, allows for those murals to be renovated or reinstalled or what have you. But actually doing anything with the murals isn't something that, it's just totally outside of the Parks Department's scope and authority, because the murals aren't actually on Parks Department property. So we can definitely have a conversation about the murals, but it's not going to be really part of this particular project because it's outside of both the scope and the purview. So with that, the only other thing that I want to add is we will need to have a resolution on this item and also on the next item, which we may or may not be able to do because we may or may not have quorum. But with that, I'd like to turn the virtual mic over to you, Laura.
Okay, thank you, Liz. That was a very informative information, and some of it I'm going to repeat because what you said was so right. Okay, so I'm Laura Droba. I'm the landscape architect for 186th Street Basketball Court, and I'm very happy to see those of you again who were at the March community input meeting to present the design. Our goals are to create a community refuge for everybody with an emphasis on basketball and upgrade the physical site. We'd like to provide oh, sorry. Whoopsie, wait, where is it? Oh, where's my screen? It's not.
Let me promote you to a co-host so that you can share your screen.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Yes.
No worries.
Okay.
While we have a minute, I just want to applaud the Conectémonos and this community board for advocating for funding for the 186th Street Courts. It's a long time coming. So thank you so much for all your advocacy and support, Yolanda and area residents, for bumping this up on everyone's radar screen.
Laura, since you are a panelist, you should be able to, yep, there you go.
Okay, thank you.
And Liz, this is Leslie Peoples. I see that Steve Simon is in participants, but not in the panelists. He may want to say something if you can promote him also.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm still Laura Droba, and let's see, our goals for this project are to create a community refuge for everyone with an emphasis on basketball and upgrade the physical site. We'd like to provide sustainable planting and stormwater management and upgrade the walls, paving, fencing, lighting, and drainage and water supply. As you know, the park is located north of Washington Bridge on West 186th Street between Audubon and St. Nicholas Avenues in Upper Manhattan. And as you said, Liz, the basketball was created after a building here was taken down after a fire in the 1970s, and the Association of Progressive Dominicans received permission from the city to establish a court here. And in 1997, the city installed fencing, lighting, and hoops. We're at a very high elevation, well out of the coastal flood zone. And neighborhood land use is dense, multifamily walk-up buildings, mostly built in the 1920s. This neighborhood map really shows how precious this site is. It's the only park within a 5-minute walk in this neighborhood. The nearest park with any sports amenities is Rowell Wallenberg Park in Highbridge, but you are getting 2 new parks. The Dyckman Rest Playground is in procurement and is brand new. And then also Monsignor Kett, which is under construction, is a total redo and will provide a new playground and comfort station. Currently, there's back to 186th Street basketball. It's a little more than an empty lot with asphalt. However, it does have these murals, as you mentioned, that really celebrate neighborhood residents. Existing conditions are simple, asphalt with non-regulation basketball markings, 4 sports lights, 4 basketball backstops, chain link fence, some of which are on retaining walls, a drinking fountain, and lighting that doesn't work, and no green space. This site, again, is in very poor condition with settling due to unstable foundation materials, broken amenities, and no drainage structures. Interestingly, the site, which is at a very high elevation, has very strong and distinct shadows cast by the buildings on 3 sides. And there's a parking lot at the rear, and this kind of makes the site act like a giant sundial. Because of the movement of light across the site, it's clear to see that on a hot summer afternoon, the place to be is on the northwest corner of the site, so you could get shade cast by the buildings. We'll get back to that later. This is the east retaining wall. It's in poor condition, and we're going to rebuild it with funds from the city retaining wall fund. It retains about 5 feet below grade. And then it's another view of the east retaining wall. I seem to have lost the picture. Let me stop the share and reopen it, I guess. Okay.
Glad I'm not the only one with technical difficulties.
That's so odd. Okay.
Could be the phase of the moon. Blame it on the eclipse.
Okay. I wonder. Okay.
While you're looking for that, can you just,
Okay.
you said something about the retaining wall fund. So the retaining wall work is not part of the financial scope of this project?
They're going to give us extra money to do that, to focus just on those retaining walls.
Great.
Yeah.
I love the sentence, they're going to give us extra money. That's
okay. Let's see.
Ricardo, are you able to share screen? Do you have the presentation?
Yeah, maybe you should open it, Leslie.
I'm going to try to call it up if Leslie can't.
I have it, Liz. Let me try.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can you see it?
Not yet.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
We got it now. Thank you.
Yeah,
so
it's very okay.
Don't worry about it.
Where were we?
Page 12. Page 12. Yeah. Thank
If you
you.
could do me a favor and also send me the deck, because it's very helpful to get the wording for the reso from like the goals and stuff.
Okay, we will.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks. So I'll call out the change slide then. Let's see. So again, this is the back side of the east retaining wall, which is in the worst shape, which we will rebuild from the ground up. And then the next slide is, okay, actually this shows how the court just doesn't drain at all. And this is one area with very bad settling. Next slide. The park has a strong identification to Dominican culture and is an extremely strong sense of ownership. The murals are beloved and the community is exploring restoring them. This one's a tribute to Rudy Frias, and you can see the aging electric cabinet and old RPZ too. Next. So looking to the front of the site, you can see the settling, and you can also see these very distinct light shadow aspect of this site. Next slide. So now we're looking the other way toward the rear of the site. And again, you get these really strong dramatic shadows. Next. So I'm not the first person to notice the passage of light through the site. On the rear west wall, we have this mural where the artist also noticed the passage of sun and time. And here he commemorates this person's life from sunrise to sunset. And you can see he painted the word sunrise so that it's always illuminated by the sun in the morning. Next. This is a shade study, as if you're a bird flying over the site, and it reveals a year's worth of solstice and equinox light and shadows on the longest and shortest days of the year. Next. So we had a very lively and well-attended community input meeting with some neighbors commenting from the barber shop. And it's clear that this site, however shabby, is the neighborhood's beloved backyard to grow up. And there's a strong desire for it to still provide an upgraded refuge for all, open in all weather and at all times. It's treasured as a place to play for kids and teens and serves as a community backyard. So there's a very strong sense of ownership and Dominican heritage. Other priorities are sustainable features, shade, seating for all ages, preservation of the murals, and a site that could also provide for multi-purpose activities such as a farmer's market, kids activities, and performances. Next. So this is the design, and this is a plan view. So you're looking at it as if you're a bird looking down. West 186 is on the right side of your screen where the entrance is. We have a basketball court, planted area, and seating shaded by 5 new trees. And the buildings, as I mentioned earlier, we have bucket hoops for kids and girls, and ladybug and bee hopscotch for kids. We also have a drinking fountain and bottle filler. There's park security lighting for the seating area with new electric service, and both retaining walls will be reconstructed with new 12-foot high chain link fence to both of the building courtyards. We're going to put a detention system under the basketball court, and also have new catch basins to drain stormwater runoff. And of course, we're going to remove the unstable foundation material and repave the site so that it's nice and flat. As Liz said, the murals are not on our property and we cannot restore them, but we can ask that our contractor protect them during construction. The best fitting regulation size basketball court for this site is a slightly narrowed junior court. Next.
Laura, did you want to
Yes.
talk about the design a little bit of the painted seal coated basketball?
That's the next slide.
Oh, okay.
So the court design is unique to this site, and the graphics are based on the movement of light through it, marking the equinox and solstice shadows. Next. This is a rendering of the new seating area for everyone to sit at the entrance to the site. Next. And again, the best fitting regulation size basketball court for this site is a modified junior court. So this is a view of the basketball site looking to the rear. Next, this is a fencing diagram. So there'll be two 10-foot wide, 4-foot high gates to accommodate the clean out trucks for the detention system. And the fence on the street would be 4 feet high. And there's also 12-foot fencing, chain link fence on both sides of the basketball hoops. Okay, next. Site furnishings include the new basketball backstops, benches, lighting in the seating area, the bucket hoops for kids, and fun markings like bumblebee and ladybug hopscotch. Next. This is a before and after diagram showing the increase in planting area for water to drain and plants to grow. Let's see, the plant material slide, I don't see it, but.
I missed it, sorry.
Oh, okay, there you go. So we'll pay attention to the sight lines and make sure there's good visibility by installing trees and low evergreen shrubs and perennials under 4 feet tall. The new trees will provide cooling shade and fall color. Next, and then next. So this is a final look at the plan again for your questions and comments.
Might I just add one thing that we had heard at the very lively community input meeting, that people were very interested in having kids of all ages be able to use this. And Laura described a lot of the different events in the seating area and the bucket ball, which has a lower hoop for smaller kids and girls, but also the design of the basketball color seal coating has not just the shadow lines, but also has some engaging graphics there. So it could be used for other things as well, when not just used for basketball.
Before I open it up for questions, and I'd like to take a lap through the public first before I go through take the committee questions. But I do just want to, both of you said something about bucket hoops for kids and girls. I think you can tell what I'm about to ask next. So I love the idea of bucket hoops for kids, but last time I checked, I'm not quite understanding why you say bucket hoops for kids and girls. You know, women also play basketball, and I like to think that this basketball court will be available to men and women and boys and girls, and that kids of any gender or no gender at all are welcome to use the bucket hoops. So I'm asking actually a semantic question. Can we please not say bucket hoops for kids and girls ever again? And just
can I
bucket hoops for kids?
Respond to that? The only reason I threw in girls, and Laura probably had the same instinct, was that we were told specifically at the community board, at the community input meeting, that there was interest in having something specifically that would engage girls. So it's not that no girls would not be playing basketball, but okay. I think the thought was that basketball tends to appeal to more like teenagers and more boys than girls. So that was I think that was our thinking. Everybody is included in everything, of course.
Fair enough. Okay, sounds good.
Excellent point. Thank you.
Thank you also for that clarification. Okay, so I'm looking to see if we have, I think the only hand, we don't have hands raised in the public, but I'd be interested to know if Rosa Yolanda, thoughts on this design?
I did raise my hands, Liz. Thank you for the opportunity. I think that the design is wonderful. So thank you for taking into consideration all the input from the meeting that we have. I have a concern about the unstable foundation. And the vision that I have, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that everything is going to be gutted out, because I understand my limited understanding of architecture and the whole bit is that one of the reasons that is unstable is because it's sinking, because that was a basement and it's hollow. So will that be addressed, the fact that this was a basement and I think that it's hollow and that's why that's been sinking for a while?
Yes, that is, yes, we will be removing, like stripping the entire site down to a certain depth to remove all that unstable material. And we already, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but we already did a couple test pits where we excavated about 6 feet down to see what's there. And yeah, you're right, it's nasty. It's broken bricks and building detritus. So yes, we are very much dedicated, and we have our engineers already on this to take care of that settling issue.
Let me clarify. It's not really hollow. It's not that there's a basement that's there that was never filled in. As Laura says, it's debris. It could be pieces of wood, pieces, bricks, but things that deteriorate over the years. If the wood starts to deteriorate, that's what makes it settle. So there's not a big void underneath. So I don't worry about that, but we will take care of removing all the debris.
Thank you for the explanation. And my other concern is, well, not concern, but how long will this project take? What's the time frame from beginning to completion? Thank you.
Well, right now we're finishing design. So after we get an approval from the community board, we will continue with our construction drawings, which will take probably another 6 months. Then it goes through what we call a procurement stage, is where it goes to our lawyers. They review the contract, we send it out to bid, and then the bidders bid on the project, and then we award it. That takes maybe 9 months to a year. And then we usually have a year construction period. But because this site is smaller than some of our typical parks, it will probably take us less than a year. Although we need to give the contractor that much time, because if it's going through a winter season, he may not be working on it during the winter. I should say he or she might not be working on it during the winter. So it's probably about 2.5 or a little bit shorter than 2.5 years from where we stand now.
Okay, but to Rosa's point, the amount of time that it would be
closed
would be a year or possibly less.
A year or possibly less, correct. Okay. Exactly. Thanks.
So it would make sense to bring in, if you've got people redoing the mural, it would make sense to restore them after the park is finished.
Yeah. Okay. Are there other questions from the public? I'm looking particularly, I'm hoping that some of the folks who had attended the public scoping session, is there anybody who attended the public scoping session, folks who live on the block, who want to speak to this project? While we're waiting for any of them, actually there was Camilla. You had asked a question about, you had stated in the Q&A that women's hoops are also standard 10 feet. She was typing that as I was asking my question. But do you have, Camilla, do you have thoughts, observations on the design, things you like, don't like? Yay, nay, thumbs up, thumbs down? Apparently not. Okay, if you change your mind and want to contribute some thoughts, just raise your hand. And next we've got Jennifer, followed by Barbara.
I just wanted to pose the question to the community and people who live immediately adjacent or in the immediate vicinity. The site currently has, I believe, a 8-foot high steel picket fence that gets locked at night. In this design, we will have a 4-foot high fence only, which means determined people will be able to access the site potentially after hours. Do people see, that's a good, can you go back, Leslie? I just want to see if.
Oh,
So
I think she
basketball-
means on the street. Yeah.
Yeah, so you'll see on the street, there's a 4-foot high fence and then just a 4-foot high fence deterring access to the basketball courts. Do people think that that will be an issue? And potentially people will be still making their way into the site after hours to play basketball?
I'm hoping that there are some folks from the 186th Street area who can speak to that. I will jump in and say that my understanding is folks do not infrequently access that site after hours, even though there is an 8-foot fence. So I'm not sure that the 8-foot fence that's there is as much of a deterrent to the use of the space as we would maybe like to think it is. So I'm not sure that making the fence lower will have an appreciable impact on that, but I don't know. It would definitely be helpful to have some input from folks who live closer to the site than I do.
Well, Liz, I have a question.
Yeah.
The current design does not allow for a higher fencing?
The current design has a 4-foot fence. If the community said, oh no, that's terrible, we want an 8-foot fence like what's there, the parks could change that. So I think what Jennifer was asking in a more roundabout way, and I will pose more directly, is do we think that the 4-foot fence is adequate, or would we prefer to see a higher 8-foot fence like what's there now? I personally am agnostic on the matter. I can see that there are good arguments for a lower fence, which is, more welcoming, nicer. It looks nicer. But if people really want to have more of an obstacle and a clearer message that like, this is closed, you can't be here.
My building is right across from the court. I hear what you're saying. I think that the 4 feet will be more beautiful, will be more appealing. The current size as it is, I hear from the people to the right and to the left of the court, the people that live in those buildings, that it gets challenging. It gets challenging when people jump the 8-foot fence and they start playing and they start participating in activity that are not conducive, to have the night that they deserve to have. So my inclination, and that is with the 8-foot fence that we have there. So my inclination will be to keep the 8-foot fence rather than to lower that. That's because of what I hear from the neighbors.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Danny, I'm looking at your face and you look like you have thoughts, but Barbara had her hand raised, so I'm gonna call on her first, and then I'm gonna ask you what your thoughts are. Barbara.
First question I had was sort of out of intellectual curiosity. Is that going to be the paving, the surfacing? Is that going to be asphalt, or what kind of surfacing is it? Looks wonderful, but what kind is it? And then the second comment I had, the benches that you have there and the kind of location it is kind of a little, not exactly cul-de-sac, but a little cutaway place. With those kind of benches, I think it will encourage homeless to sleep or to gather. I think you have to make the partitions in the middle of the benches. I don't think you can have the longer, like 3-foot, 4-foot benches. You have to have like the dividers in the benches.
Oh, on the 8-foot benches, yeah, we need the handrails so that you can't sleep on them. Yes.
Yeah, because that's
right.
not in your pictures right now. In your pictures, it's long benches.
Yeah, it's schematic. So this shows what it actually looks like. The 39 World's Fair bench has this big handrest, has 3 handrests on it, so we can't really sleep there.
Okay,
Barbara, yeah, to be clear, the schematic just shows a bench, but that's why they have the page with what the actual materials are. If you look at the World's Fair bench.
Materials bench, okay, that's good. So what is that paving? Is it what's it called?
Oh, well, that's a good question. The paving in the seating area is asphalt because that provides a really good surface for these thermoplastic games you can see on the lower right. And then in the basketball area, it's also asphalt, with what we call seal coat paint, which is a standard sports surfacing, which is you see it in all tennis courts and basketball courts around the city. It's a standard colored surfacing.
Oh, it's a special paint.
Yes, but it has like some thickness to it, and it I think it also has the right kind of friction for activities.
Oh, okay, it's very interesting. Okay, all right, thank you. And what is the plastic thing you said for the seating area? You said these plastic forms?
Oh, they're called thermoplastic. They're these little flat markings that are made of thermoplastic is what they use to mark when you cross the street, the crosswalks, the striping. It's a similar material.
Is that put on top or is it embedded in the asphalt?
It's on top.
Oh, okay. All right, that's interesting.
And I'm guessing it's a heat transfer of some kind, hence the name thermoplastic.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, all right, that's interesting. So you can have a lot of variation with it. Okay, thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Before I get to Danny, we've got in the Q&A, Louis Kleinman asks, has anyone checked with the police for their opinion on fence height? That would be helpful. So Jennifer, I don't know if that's a Jennifer thing or if that's a Laura or a Ricardo or a Leslie thing. But if someone could check with the precinct, the precinct commander on their thoughts, that would be useful.
Sure.
You know what, we do not have a policy of checking with the NYPD about our fences. We prefer to check with the neighborhoods and the communities and the residents.
Of course,
totally
Ricardo.
understood, but I think it would be helpful. I think that I'm not suggesting that the Parks Department have a policy of saying to the NYPD, hey, what do you want to see in fencing? But to Rosa Yolanda's point, that the police are likely to have some information of the, yes, we have a lot of complaints about whatever, or no, we don't. I mean, you know, Rosa Yolanda said what she said, and I think that's useful feedback, but I suspect that like the Precinct Community Council, which is the place where the public registers that kind of feedback, that's going to be information which is materially useful as a consideration, which is different from going to the police department and having them tell you what to do. Fair?
All right.
So,
Liz, can I have one more one? I just there is a young man that is in the meeting, Alfonso and his mom Marisol. I asked them about the height, and they definitely say that as it is their preference. It's their first time in this type of meeting, so perhaps they didn't know how to participate. I also consulted with Omar, who is from Conectémonos and is my son, and we've been involved in this project. And he said definitely an 8-footer, the way it is.
Okay.
Just wanted to share that.
Okay. Louis Kleinman, a member of the public, also said instead of asphalt was permeable pavement considered.
We did our borings on the site, and because it's such a high elevation, there's bedrock underneath it, and so I don't think we have the type of soil that would drain permeable paving very well. And also, I think I'm not sure we can put the play feature markings on permeable pavers.
Okay, that's helpful.
Is there some permeability? I think one of the things we have to do is come up with a new drainage system. And so we're going to be draining the entire site into what's called an underground detention retention tank. And I think there is some permeability in that, correct, Laura? Because those are permeable pipes.
No,
and then it overflows into the city stormwater system.
No, it goes into the detention area, and then it just slowly percolates into the city system of the drainage pipes. That because of the bedrock and the borings, we don't have the right kind of drainage soil underneath the site. I am hoping to put some of the stormwater runoff into the plant beds. That will be part of what's developed in a little bit in the future. So there is a possibility of doing some of the stormwater runoff into the plant beds.
If I could ask Laura, isn't there an overall increase in permeability on the site because of the additional greenery?
Yes, that's right. Well, there's a diagram for that.
So it goes from it goes up to 11% permeability from something which is just negligible.
Yeah.
So so we have taken into account permeability on the site.
Also, I expanded the sidewalk plant beds, so some of the sidewalk runoff we can capture too.
Okay, thank you. I want to also call attention in the Q&A. Camilla said Camilla has an issue with our focus on the home on that we can't possibly be advocating for anti-homeless measures on park benches. The homeless are members of the community, not a pestilence to be kept away, and that we should show some compassion. And to that point, I mean, I understand not wanting to. I understand both sides of the issue, but Camilla is absolutely right that when we're talking about homeless people, we can't just say, oh, you know, we have to keep everybody away. This has to be everybody's park, and we have to be welcoming to the entire community and make sure that everybody is able to use the park in a way that works for themselves and also for each other. We've got a couple of other people in the in the chat. Alejandro Aravalo says he has the same issue as well. I'd like to, if again, this is a public meeting, so if there are people in the public who want to speak to these issues, feel free to raise your hands. Use the raise hand feature, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen. And, I'm happy to call on people who want to speak to these issues, and we can figure out, like, are there changes that need to happen in the design? Are we happy with this design? I want to call on Danny Bonilla, who's been patiently waiting.
I just wanted to say that I thought it was a pretty cool presentation. I thought that was cool that they use the sun as a kind of like marker for the basketball court. I also thought it would be a cool idea to maybe quite possibly like those murals. I know that they're not part of like parks, but if maybe they could maybe start a bid on having a local artist actually do something on those walls. And also I'm listening to this whole 4-foot wall, 4-foot fence, 8-foot fence. I would say like leave it whatever stand fence size there is. Even if they had it at a 4-foot fence, I don't think that would be too much of a problem. It would probably be less headache. Like people are not gonna try to over a 8-foot fence to get hurt. It's just, I don't think there's people playing basketball at like 4 a.m.
Okay. So, I mean, in terms of the fence height, if the current fence height were 4 feet, I don't know that I would necessarily, without having had public notice to say that we were having, we did have public notice and fairly good notice that this project was being discussed, but there was nothing in that notice that said, and we're going to be talking about the fencing height. So other things being equal, although the 4-foot fence height in the proposed design is lovely, I think that there's a strong argument to be made for keeping the fence height what it is currently. So if it were currently a 4-foot fence and your design had a 4-foot fence, I would say, okay, great. Given that the current height of the fence is 8 feet, and among the many pieces of feedback in the public scoping meeting, no one said, and we would like a lower fence. That was not actually one of the things that anybody asked for. So given that there is some feedback here this evening saying lowering the fence is perhaps not a great idea, given that no one asked for the fence height to be lowered, no one expressed any issue with there being an 8-foot fence, I'm thinking maybe sticking with an 8-foot fence would be the winning move. Are there folks in the attendee list? I'm looking at some of the people who raised questions on other aspects. Camilla, Jim.
Liz, I have a quick question.
Yes.
I'm actually interested also about like those murals, and if parks are able to even like do something about that, like do like bids for people in the neighborhood,
So I'm going to repeat what I said earlier in the meeting. The murals are on the walls of the buildings on either side of the lot. They are not part of the lot itself. So the murals are the property of those 2 buildings that they're on. And the only person or people who have control over those murals are the landlords of those two buildings. So Parks has said that they will help facilitate if the landlord wants to, is okay with the mural being repaired, changed, what have you. Parks has said that they will help to grant access, because of course you'd need to access the basketball courts in order to do anything to the murals, but the murals themselves are not on Parks property. So it's not up to Parks to say anything about the murals themselves because they're not on Parks property. It's a little bit of a catch-22.
I see. I get it. Because I thought it was just like right by the wall. And I kind of like get that you have to like go through like landlords and I just thought it would be a cool idea if they figure out like some kind of like a partnership, and if they do go with the repair and renovate and like make it from brand new, that would be cool if they can have like someone locally, you know, like to continue representing the neighborhood and whatnot.
100% agreed. 100% agreed. It would be helpful to know if. So, Ricardo, I understand that it's not Parks's property, but does Parks have any ability to, as a city agency, for example, reach out to the landlords of those, to the owners of those two buildings and say something like, hey, we're renovating this basketball court. We do not own your buildings. We do not own these murals, but as long as this is being redone, would you, the owner of these buildings, be open to engaging with the community to repair these murals, to work with a local artist, etc.? I just feel like you've got, as a city agency, like a little bit more standing and a little bit more ability to work with HPD to figure out who the landlord is and how you even contact them.
Liz, I think that's a question that Steve Simon can answer. It's really not something that Capital can answer. Steve? Unmute yourself, Steve.
Yeah, I was going to point out that at the community input meeting, this issue was discussed, and there were people attending the meeting who said that they knew the original artists, and the council member's office said that they would work with them to identify the people, try to get them to come back and restore the murals. And I tell you, before, I mean, well, we're willing to work with Carmen's office on this, but I think the first step is to reach out to the artists and make sure that we have somebody prepared to do the restoration work. We can touch base again with Carmen's office, but I first would want to know that we have artists available to do the work.
I think that's fair.
That would be great, Steve, if you would be able to reach out to Carmen's office, to reach out to the people who know the artist. That would be great to get the ball rolling. I mean, we obviously have some time since there's the whole rest of the design and the procurement and the construction. But again, it would be super helpful if Parks could kind of take the lead on figuring out who the landlord is, how we get in touch with them, and between Parks and the council member's office to, you know, maybe get somewhere on that.
Well, I can't commit that we will take the lead on this, but I'm willing to work with Carmen's office to try to get it done. But I don't want to bring in somebody else to work on work that that someone else did. This is, I think, some of these murals are fairly sensitive. And so I would want to try to see if we can identify the original artist.
Okay.
Steve knows what's up.
I appreciate that. I totally appreciate that. Okay, so Alejandro Arevalo, member of the public, he has written in the chat, in the Q&A, I would unmute him, but he says he's at work and he's not able to speak right now. So I'm reading his comment. He says, I agree with the lower fence. It makes it look more welcoming than prohibitive all day long. High fences make it look like there's a penitentiary yard in the community. That said, what is it like in other places around the city? Maybe someone from Parks would know. Can someone from Parks speak to what is the norm?
The norm is all of our new playgrounds and parks, we're putting in 4-foot fences because, as you say, they're more welcoming. You can see over them into the park. And that's what was called our Parks Without Borders initiative that our previous commissioner had started. And we're continuing on with that. There are some communities that feel that they need a higher fence. Sometimes the commissioner will agree to a 5-foot fence. And sometimes we go back to our standard 7-foot fence. We actually have two fence heights that we use. The 4-foot is the primary one that we use as the park perimeter. We also have a taller fence, the 7-foot fence, which has been used on some of our older parks that you'll see. The fence that you have on 196th Street right now is a custom fence that was done at 8 feet. So if we were to go to the higher fence, if that's what you request, we would bring that back to our commissioner. We probably wouldn't go as high as 8 feet. Our standard 7-foot fence has actually the pickets on top of it, which make it even harder to climb, which you don't have on the fence right now. I can flip back to the existing fence. But definitely our standard for all new parks is the 4-foot fence, which is, again, more welcoming. Did I pass it, Laura?
Yeah.
You passed.
There it is.
Okay, there it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is really not a welcoming fence.
No, it's
Yeah,
not.
it's not welcoming. No, no, no.
And there's another picture too, toward the very front of the, toward the front of the front. Keep going.
Wait,
Here.
Oh, there it is.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah, this, yeah.
No. No. For a space that small, it gives it a penitentiary look.
It does. I would
For
agree.
a space that small.
Yeah, that is a valid point. Okay, Barbara, I take it that was your question, or do you?
No, I had one question. The plantings are wonderful, and I think that gives a nice bright look to a what would be sort of a dark, small space. How will they be maintained? Is the community prepared to garden them and water and maintain them? What's the plan?
There would be an irrigation box. So there would be a quick coupler box where you could put in a hose. And then, we do have a, maintenance and operations at parks that would periodically come by, but it might not get the care that it always needs. But there would be parks, I think Steve could answer to that better.
So really, you're at this point, you're planning that parks would maintain it. But since there seems to be such community love for the space, it would appear to try to cultivate that some people in the surrounding buildings could look after it, possibly give them some workshop and how to maintain it. That would be a whole initiative you could maybe start. What do you think, Jennifer?
That would be terrific. Yeah.
We would really welcome community input. They would need a special key to access the water, but it would certainly thrive much better with community help.
Okay.
So that would be something that would hopefully could be developed, because it's not going to be that hard, but would have to be consistent. So I think the woman that spoke here tonight
That
and
would
some
be
of the other
Rosa-
people in the building, we have years to plan ahead for that, but hopefully that they could take that initiative.
Liz, Omar is here and he would like to say something about a
Yep.
higher fence.
Yep.
Hey, Liz, how you doing? So,
Well-
you know, I lived on the block for 40 years. In my opinion, the reason for the high fence would be more of a safety issue. No matter what bald sport is playing in there, yes, it is a basketball court, but people sometimes play football, people play stickball, people play basketball, people play soccer. The point of the high fence is to keep the ball inside of the court because it is still a busy residential street. A low fence is kids are gonna be chasing balls into the street on a regular basis.
The
If you
fence,
see
Yeah,
the
the-
plan for the fence, there's
Yeah.
actually a 12-foot fence, which is near the basketball court. And then in the seating area are the 4-foot fences.
Oh, in the fort list,
So-
as long as all I'm saying is that whatever fence is to the street should be high to keep the balls in the playing area. Because, like I said, I grew up here. We've played football, basketball, stickball, and keeping kids safe.
Omar, I'm going to interrupt you for a second. So there's two different things going. There's a bunch of different fences. There are 12-foot fences surrounding the aspect ratio of the full. Somebody's got some music on. Can you kill that audio, please? So the aspect ratio of the full footprint of the site is much longer than it is wide. About
Yes.
2/3 of it will be the basketball court, and around that 2/3 that is the basketball court are 12-foot fences.
Oh, okay.
So that speaks to your concern about making sure that the balls are contained. The front 1/3 of the area is a lower area. That's where the seating is, where the plantings are, where the bucket hoops for kids are, where the ladybug, thermo, whatever thing is for hopscotch. That's where all that stuff is. And that's closer to the street. So there's.
I understand. Okay,
The
see.
current design has 4-foot fencing around that, and that is what would be locked at night. So the question is, do we as a community want the 4-foot fencing, which is the Parks Department standard, new Parks Department standard, which is much more welcoming, much nicer, much more open, totally loses the penitentiary look of the 8-foot fencing? Or do we want to go with a slightly higher fence that is still a little bit lower than what we have now, a 7-foot fence that has a picket on top, which would be less welcoming, but still, frankly, an improvement over the current fencing, which is terrible. I mean, it's
Agreed.
the extra 1 foot, and it's got a real penitentiary look. So even if we went with the 12, someone's asking in the chat, will the 12-foot basketball court fence be separately locked? And the answer is no. It's not a gate. It's a fence that will be, so the width is like this much, and that the 12-foot fencing will not run the full width. So it's not a gate that opens, it's a fence. So it won't be locked. So the only thing that's locking would be the 4-foot or possibly 7-foot with a picket fence at the curb. I mean, on the park side of the curb. And the question is, do we want something that is lower and more welcoming? But
I like the design. Whoever's flipping through the pictures, I like the design of the front of the front. Yes, I really enjoy the design of the seating area in front. I'm just a little, I just wonder how much basketball court is really going to be left after that design, but.
You get almost exactly a regulation junior court. We just had to narrow it a few feet because the site's kind of narrow. So
Yeah,
you'll
no,
have
the site is narrow. Okay.
Yeah. So you'll get
All right.
almost a real regulation size.
Yeah, and what that gets you is if people want to play like a legit pickup game, there will be 2 hoops, and if people want to be doing a sort of one-on-one or practicing shots, there will be 2 hoops. It'll be a different configuration than what's there now, which has the orient. So right now, what's there is a much 2 different. So right now, what's there is it's oriented side by side, and then there's that 3rd hoop closer.
Well, right now, well, there's technically 4 backboards, but only 2 functioning hoops. Oh no, there was a 4th backboard. Now there's only 3. You're right. There was 4 at some point in time. Now there's only 3.
So this design will have 2 backboards.
Okay.
So the bad news is fewer backboards. The good news is a legitimate junior size court for like a real game, and also a much more beautiful setting that allows other kinds of uses that people seem to want. So
yeah, no, of course. That sounds great. Yeah. See, now that I'm getting a better picture, a more bird's eye view of what the plan is, and thank you for explaining about the basketball court size. Like, yeah, if we have to lose a little to get a little, that's not a problem.
Okay.
Liz, I'm going to interrupt just to tell you, Laura and I are also going to have a computer issue in about 8 minutes.
Yeah.
We just got a notification. This happens every week or so. They shut our system down. We're going to be signed off in about 8 minutes. We can come back on, but you may lose us for about 2 minutes.
Okay.
Ricardo can
we're
continue
actually going to
talking.
have to wrap this part of it up.
Okay.
A whole nother presentation.
Okay.
An equally robust conversation. So thank you for that heads up. I want to try and figure out, is there anybody else who hasn't spoken who still has a hand up? We've got Ricardo and we've got Rosa. Quick last comments.
Liz, I'm good.
Okay, so then I'm gonna take your hand down. I can't take your, okay.
I was just going to note that we're going to have to do some interface, some legal interface with the 2 abutters, the landlords of the 2 buildings, the owners of the 2 abutting buildings, because we're going to be doing some very intrusive wall reconstruction work on their property anyhow. So we're probably going to have some kind of memorandum of agreement or understanding with them through our legal office. So if it helps, we might be able to, use that to help you come up with some kind of agreement to repaint the walls. But we can't commit to that because I don't think we're allowed to use city funds to paint on private property.
We're not asking the Parks Department to expend funds, and we certainly do not want to repaint the walls because these are sensitive murals. But it's huge to know that you will be engaging with the landlords anyway because of the subsurface infrastructure work that you have to do. So given that you're going to be talking to them anyway, that's great that you'll be able to at least open up a dialogue to be able to begin to have some kind of conversation about what might be done with regard to restoration of those murals. So I just want to, it sounds like everybody likes this design, and really the only, and that if we're assuming we're doing a resolution that we are, I need, by the way, everybody who's on the committee to please turn their cameras on so that I can see your faces and see you raise your hands. So
Real fast, Liz, if it's any information, the people that did the mural, it's Tat's crew.
Right.
I just information from a friend of mine.
Yeah,
okay.
that's what I found too. Yeah.
Okay, if you can, if you have actual contact information for them, if you could send it to me so that I can include it in the minutes and also pass that on to Parks would be great. So it sounds like we are in favor of this design. We like it, and that we would have a resolution that would go to the Parks Commissioner and to the Public Design Commission, that we like this design. The resolution would include, some of the context for the site, the issues raised at the scoping meeting, the specifics of the plan, the specifics of the funding and the timing as described. And the only open issue is, are we approving of this design with the lower 4-foot fence? Or are we calling on the Parks Department for a slightly higher fence, the 7-foot fence with the pickets? Based on the public input, it's sounding like the public seems to prefer, some members of the public prefer the lower fence. Rosa Yolanda was saying the higher fence would be better, but Omar is saying the lower fence would be better. So, this isn't, I don't write resolutions based on what I think. I capture what it is that we think. So what is it that we think?
Lower fence for me.
Okay, Mancita?
I agree, lower fence. It's more aesthetically pleasing and more welcoming.
Danny?
Lower fence.
Barbara?
Lower fence.
Anybody in the public opposed to the lower fence?
Rosa Yolanda is.
Okay, anybody else?
And so is Omar.
Uh-huh. All right. Not really sure what to do with that, but I think we go with the lower fence.
Yes, yes.
Looking at the comments that people had put in earlier, other people, it sounds like the lower fence is the winning move. So I need a show of hands from the committee.
Lower fence.
Alexis, are you here?
Yes, I'm sorry, my camera's not working.
No worries. Okay, so everyone is in favor. So it's going to be unanimous, but there are only 6 of us. Wait, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's only 5 of us, so we don't actually have quorum. So this is going to have to go to the executive committee, but okay, with the lower fence. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Welcome back, Leslie. And okay, so it's 8:17 and we're gonna move to the Dykeman waterfront. Thank you to everybody at Parks Capital for this.
Thank you.
You're welcome to stay on, but you're also welcome to move on with your evenings. And oh, I'm sorry. Just as a closing thing, Jim Marcinek, sorry for mispronouncing your name earlier. The opening and closing hours will be the standard opening and closing hours for parks and playgrounds, and those will be posted. And Louis Kleinman said, it's too bad that part of the seating could not be within a community garden. Yes, you are absolutely right, but there's a limit to how much you can put. It's a very small space. And already, as you hear, this wonderful seating amenity is eating into the basketball piece of it. So there's only so much you can put into that small of a space. So, okay. Oh, wait, I have okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. And moving on to the Dyckman waterfront, just by way of introduction. Once again, this is a very heavily used public amenity. We have the fishing pier that and just for people who aren't clear about this, the Dyckman waterfront relates to the area that includes that very small public beach, sort of beach sandy area at the western terminus of Dyckman Street, the fishing pier, and the waterfront area south of the Hudson, not the restaurant itself, but the beach area, the dock, the pier, and then going south to where the Inwood Canoe Club is. We have long since prioritized wanting an eco dock, and as part of the points of agreement for the Inwood rezoning, the city committed to serious infrastructure development at the Dyckman waterfront. We had an extremely well-attended public scoping meeting in June. Very well attended, lots of public input, and I'm really looking forward to this presentation from Chris on repairs and renovations and improvements to the Dyckman waterfront area. Take it away.
All right. How do I put up the presentation?
You can share screen because you are a presenter.
All right, let me see if I can figure it. Bear with me.
Yep.
Forgive me, I'm not as familiar with this particular with the Zoom application. Where would I find the share screen
So
options?
at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a green button that says share screen.
It's right in front of me, of course.
No
Thank you so
worries.
much.
No
And
worries.
obviously everyone can hear me. Before I get started, so anyways, I'll introduce myself. I'm Christopher Amy, Deputy Director of Marina Infrastructure with New York City Parks. I also have with me Nate Grove, the Chief of Waterfront and Marina Operations, who operates the marina and who are working together on this project. And I think he wanted to just quickly to say a few words if he's able to while I get set up.
Yep. Is Nate? I'm not seeing him. Oh, wait.
He is in the general
Okay.
public gallery.
Nate, I'm gonna promote you to panelist.
Okay. Thank you, Liz. Do you have me?
Yep.
Oh, wonderful. Hi, everyone. It's been a little while, although it was great to see that attendance in June. So thanks to all who came out for that. But it's been a couple years since I presented on Parks operation, taking over the marina. So I'll be brief, but I'll stay on now that I'm getting out of this high school open house for my son. So you got me for the rest of the evening. I promise I won't bring up fences unless you guys bring up fences. But as most of you are aware, Parks assumed in-house operation at Dyckman when Manhattan River Group was ousted in mid-2019. You may also be aware that Manhattan River Group's failed operation was preceded by Jerry O'Rourke's operation of the site. Jerry's license also was terminated prematurely when Jerry, along with 8 other people, were arrested in 2006 on charges of helping to operate a large-scale drug ring out of the marina and associated buildings. Similarly, the Parks Department terminated the first site operator, John Bolt, in the late 1990s due to mismanagement of the site as well. So in 2019, we determined that in order to have the marina really serve the public's best interest, we should operate it directly. as we do our other sites like 79th Street Boat Base and World's Fair Marina. Those were both failed concessions as well that we took over before my time. We now have a responsive and responsible 24-hour coverage of the site with trained park stock masters and maintenance and operations staff. In addition to supporting recreational boating, most rewardingly, we have also succeeded in opening up the site to a far broader range of users and community partners when compared to how the site was used under the previous private operators. So this summer was great. We've really leveraged Hudson River Community Sailing and the longtime adjacent Inwood Canoe Club. And we continue to offer more programming and continue to expand on that programming. Just this summer alone, I'll tick off a few of them. I think some of you were down for some of these. If you haven't, please do come down. We had Heroes on the Hudson with Hudson River Community Sailing and Wounded Warrior Project. We did free public sales hosted by HRCS. Rocking the Boats Manhattan's Rocking the Boats does a circumnavigation of Manhattan. They stopped at the docks and did some tours of their boats. We brought Clearwater down there a couple times now for deck tours and marine education with Fresh Youth Initiative. We had the Impossible Dream, which is an adapted vessel. They did deck tours and sails with adaptive participants. We're doing oyster monitoring classes with Billion Oyster Project. City Parks Foundation's Coastal Classroom Program. Urban Park Rangers, Marine Education Clinics. And of course, we did a movie, Under the Stars. Unfortunately, that didn't get promoted enough. We got to do a better job of that, but we showed Luca. We had some people down for that as well. So that's my quick intro. Again, I'll be here, but come on down. Every summer, we're going to keep building out the programming, and we hope we can get some ideas from the community. But but if nothing else, bring your friends, bring your family, and join us for some of these events. We're really trying to promote more and expand upon.
Thanks, Nate. Okay, so that's kind of a look at what we're doing and what we've been up to. And this presentation will give you a sense of kind of the future of what we're looking at for the area, generally speaking, down at Dyckman Street and on the Hudson. The project is formally the reconstruction of Fort Washington Park, Dyckman Marina. And as Liz mentioned, this project really came about because of the POA, the points of agreement that came out of the rezoning of Inwood in 2018. And that POA, item number 30 specifically, is what drives the scope of this project. And we'll get into that in a moment. It's a 5-acre site, and Stantec Consulting is the design consultant that we're working with. Let me move forward here. Too far. There we go. Okay. So, like I said, the goals of this project are driven by that POA. So what I really want to talk about tonight is the in-water items, the structural items. And the reason why we're focused on that up front is because the POA is very specific to that in-water scope, bullets 1 and 3 that you see here on this slide, to restore and reconstruct the Canoe Club Pier, the Dyckman Fishing Pier, the surrounding shorelines and in-water structures on the Hudson. That's pretty clear. We have an inspection report that tells us what needs to be done, and we'll get into that in a moment. And to provide for the eco dock that Liz referenced, that it's been about a decade in the making, and that it's wrapped into this project, and we'll show you what we propose for that within this presentation as well. The reason why this presentation tonight is going to focus on those in-water items is because to get to the upland scope, that middle bullet there, which is the Dyckman Street end, we need to hammer down, pin down exactly what we can do for the permitting of those in-water structures. Permitting is very difficult in the water in New York City with DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation through New York State, and the U.S. Army Corps, and Small Business Services, SBS, the city agency that permits in-water construction, like DOB for land, SBS does for the water. So the permitting here is a big lift. And if we're going to do a project here on the water, we want to get all that done in one shot. We don't want to have to be re-permitting for some future phase or what have you. So we want to pin down that scope, and then we can refine our budget when we know that we're headed in the right direction on the in-water items. And when we have that budget for the in-water work, we plan to come back and take a deeper dive looking at the upland scope. But we will show you some of that upland work in this presentation tonight, so we can get some feedback and some initial thoughts on what we're thinking. Just to speak to the upland scope before we move on, the POA only speaks to making it more inviting, quote unquote. It's vague, but we certainly can do that. And to providing wayfinding signage. I think there's a lot more potential for that upland area than just generally making it more inviting. But it'll really be dependent on budget, what we can do within this project. So this is the site, Dykeman Street End in Inwood. Again, this is in the flood zone, the V zone, the most restrictive zone for permitting through DEC and through construction within the over water and along the water, which does come into play in our considerations for this project. And the surrounding land use is mostly park around and mixed use as you go upland. In the neighborhood context, park-wise, you do have Dykeman Fields along the water. This is the street end here is the only access point to Dykeman Fields. It's also the only access point to the Fort Washington Park Greenway, which heads south and dead ends on its way towards the George Washington Bridge. We also have access to Payson Playground just up the street here, and generally speaking, Fort Tryon Park and Inwood Hill Park. So historically, one of the things I love about this project is this has always been like a nexus of all these different uses, in water uses especially, dating back to the Civil War era and even before. But you've had, around the turn of the century, you had swimming and public recreation at the site. In the early 20th century, boating really became a big part of the culture down at this location. You had all of these clubs along the water that developed for kayaking and yacht clubs and so on and so forth, which, the Inwood Canoe Club became the sole survivor out of that group, so to speak. But that use was very important to the development of the area. The ferry, the Englewood Ferry, operated out of there. But I love this photo because you can actually see, and if you know the site today, and you'll see in just a moment, you can see this little stub of a L-shaped pier in the center photo down in the bottom left. And you can also see this this foundation structure and this box here. That's almost exactly as it is today. The pier has been replaced in the interim. But this industrial site as it was then, there was boat manufacturing here and so on and so forth. It really echoes to today's layout of the site. You can see a ferry boat leaving from the site, also in this photo on the right, which highlights the surrounding parks. Bearing in mind the marine use of the site and wanting to move forward and keep that as the focal point of this part of the park. The existing conditions, which drive this project largely, the in-water conditions and structures. I'll start with in the water, and I'll look at from the right here and moving over, and just kind of acclimatize you to the areas we're talking about. So the beach, when we talk about the beach, it's this sandy area here. This is the only publicly accessible sand beach in the island of Manhattan that we have here at this site, which is a really cool amenity. There's this old industrial foundation structure, which kind of eats up a lot of that beach space, and I'll show you photos of that in a moment. The fishing pier, again, was never really intended for fishing. It was an industrial pier that's been repurposed, which makes sense when you realize it's immediately adjacent to this DEP CSO, a combined sewer overflow. So fishing and sewage interacting potentially at this site. Not ideal, but that's the condition. The pier itself also sort of fences off the beach area. So the views of the Palisade from the beach area are limited by the existence of that fishing pier and the way that it's orchestrated. And also generally that area down around the beach, because of that pier being there, it just feels a little bit uninviting and kind of isolating. Moving on in the water, we come over to the marina area. So these are the marina docks that park staff operate. It's a timber dock structure. And then there's the boat ramp, the only publicly accessible boat ramp in the island of Manhattan that we have at this site. The revetment stones, you see this kind of cobbled area here. These are the shoreline treatment, which does come into play in this project. And then the Inwood Canoe Club down here to the left is this structure, this timber pier that has been here for 100+ years at this point. I guess, or I seem to recall, but the club has this storage over water of kayaks and canoes, and the Inwood Canoe Club offers this public programming here, and repairing that structure is an important part of this project as well. Not featured in this photo is the mooring fields further to the south, where boats are anchored and they can come and go via the marina as well, something to keep in mind. So that's kind of the in-water picture of what we're looking at. I'll also mention the upland area, just drawing your attention back over to the end of Dykeman Street. You have this hashed black line, that's the property line. So when we talk about the street end, we talk about
Are you
above
saying
that.
that's your therapist?
The street end at this point I should note, does have 7 parking spaces that are obligated for Parks to provide to the Hudson Restaurant, which is our concession restaurant, and their license agreement requires that we provide such spaces. So in an analysis of the site, it was determined that the fishing pier back over by the beach area is unfortunately, it's a loss. It can't be repaired because of its condition, and it needs to be replaced. Along with that, the beach itself has some debris buildup and stones that have slipped out of place that generally make, detract from the area, and cleaning that up is an important part of the project scope. And then generally removal of this platform, which doesn't really serve a modern purpose, to open up that beach area, we think will be a big benefit to the area. Moving back into the marina, the boat ramp does need some structural repairs, some concrete work. The docks themselves that we operate, they're not in bad condition, but there are problems with the dock that play into the proposal that we're going to make in this presentation tonight. The slips themselves, there's 18 of them at present, 4 of which are not accessible because it's in such shallow water. We think we can do better, and we'll show you how we would do that. There is some revetment work along here, just replacing stone. Inwood Canoe Pier. So one of the really exciting things that came out of our investigations was realizing that the canoe pier can be repaired, thankfully. Now, if you recall, I mentioned that this is the V zone, the most restrictive permitting zone for building. And I think building over water, that storage facility, those kayaks and canoes, would be a real challenge, a real permitting challenge. But because of the ability to repair that, we can do like a kind of a lighter touch and not have to do such a deep dive with DEC and without permitting. And I think it's going to be a big benefit to the project to be able to do a lighter touch there. The timber bulkhead, though, will need to be replaced. It's not salvageable at this point. And we'll take a deeper, a closer look at the canoe club work in a few slides. So that's the in-water condition that's driving the project. Upland, I'll just mention that this street end really has become a parking lot. As the community I'm sure is aware and has made us aware, there are parking issues, double parking, people opening up fire hydrants and washing cars, drinking, playing loud music at all hours of the night. These are the complaints that we get and that we hear. Parks patrols and NYPD and parks operations have had trouble controlling the site and controlling for those issues. So we're going to seek to look for ways to mitigate and to improve the condition at that street end through this project in the vein of trying to make the site more inviting for the public. Okay. Just a note for the tree survey that we did on the site, we did find that unfortunately a lot of the larger trees at the street end beach area are just in poor condition, and they're going to have to be removed, not based on the design, but just because they're not well. And these trees will be fairly noticeable, and we'll propose to replace appropriately as needed. So getting into just some photos of the site, this is the entry to the marina here, and coming around the corner, this is that street end that I was mentioning where you have the cars lining up, playing loud music and double parking. This is the entry up to Dykeman Fields. It is this masonry wall here. I show it because it's important that this is like a cul-de-sac, essentially, the Dykeman Fields, and this is the only access point, and it kind of becomes part of whatever we do at the street end, but also it provides for us an interesting palette of material choice for future improvements to the site, this nice granite, and trying to make things mesh together when we do our upland design would be ideal. And then here to the right, the Fort Washington Park Greenway that I mentioned, that travels south and dead ends on its way to the George Washington Bridge. That's the access corridor to the Inwood Canoe Club. Looking at this is the street end as you approach the fishing pier. You can see it's not in great shape here, the concrete, the curving. And this high fence is not super inviting. They do close this beach area down in the evenings. Parks Operations does. And there's a desire to be able to continue to do that, but also to maybe find ways to make it a bit less imposing of a gate system. And this is the fishing pier that is well loved, well used, and has served its purpose and has served its lifespan, and unfortunately needs to be replaced. Some views from that fishing pier. Here you see this is a DEC fishing clinic that happened on the pier. We'll be connecting with DEC to talk more about ways to improve fishing at the site through the design. But the views from this fishing pier at present, you can see the Palisades, the George Washington Bridge. You can even see the Mario Cuomo Bridge. And what we propose will continue and improve upon those views. The beach area, you can see here, kayakers do use this beach from time to time to launch. It's always preferable to launch from a sandy beach versus a dock or something more complicated. But you can see this old industrial foundation kind of gets in the way. It takes up a lot of that beach space. So removing that, we think, would be a great benefit. I couldn't find a good photo, but I do know that there are submerged pile fields here. So for kayaking and fishing even, that can be a challenge. And for the purpose of improving kayaking going forward, we'll look to remove those piles that are submerged so that nobody gets caught on those, or they don't pose a risk or danger to anyone using the beach. This is the boat ramp and the dock system with the views of the Palisades, lovely views there. Just some notes about the dock system. At present, these timber docks here have a limit, a 20-person limit at any given time. Now, the intent of this project, the eco dock specifically, but also when we talk to the community, the intent of the project was to see larger vessels, excursion vessels, classroom type vessel visits, sailing clinics, things like that, that do have larger group implications. And we saw, if anyone in this meeting was on the circumnavigation of Manhattan relating to the Harlem River earlier this year, we saw that we weren't able to get the full groups on. We had to escort smaller groups up and down the docks. So it's just kind of, it's not congruent with the desired use. So our plan will propose to kind of increase the capacity of that dock system. You'll also note this tall ship here. This is the Clearwater sailing vessel that does programming at the site. You'll see the height of this vessel is much higher than the floating dock system, which creates an accessibility issue for getting up and onto the boat. I should mention it's totally ADA, but we can do better than ADA when it comes to that kind of vessel access. And what we propose in this presentation in a few moments will provide for these taller ship access points. This is just a view into the marina looking towards the dock, the pier head of the docks there. And this is the riprap. When I talk about the riprap revetment that needs a little bit of stone work, that's what I'm talking about. And this is the Inwood Canoe Club, where we will be doing repairs, substructure repairs and new bulkheading. So we did have a community session in June, as Liz mentioned, and I won't rehash the whole thing. A lot of it was reiterating the POA, the points of agreement, which makes sense because those were based on community sessions as well. But what came out of that meeting that was of note, I think, for our purposes here is the desire to see a lot more vessel programming, different types of vessels, diversity of vessel types, and different kinds of programming, excursions, maybe fishing charters, fall foliage tours up north or to the Palisades, and these big sailing vessels, so on and so forth. So continuing to try to provide additional programming and these docks as a community amenity. Also, there was a desire to really open up that beach, which I've already referenced a few times. But for the kayaking community, it would be great, and just generally for the park, for park users to be able to go down to a beach in the island of Manhattan, it's a unique asset. And improving upon that is just one of the biggest things I think we can deliver here for the local community. So with those two concepts in mind, it occurred to us that maybe this old fishing pier that was never meant to be a fishing pier, that blocks views from the beach, and that needs to be replaced anyways, there might be a better location for this fishing pier, which is what we're about to show on this next slide. So what you're seeing here in this slide is a concept, and we'll go back to the beach to show you what that beach would look like. But the concept here is to take that L-shaped fishing pier that's over at the beach and move it into the dock system area of the marina, where it would still serve as a fishing pier, and it would benefit all user groups. And I'll run down a list of bullets as to the benefits of doing this. But it would primarily be a steel and concrete pier that runs into deeper water than the current dock system does, and then the current fishing pier does, which gets you out deeper into the river, better views of both bridges and the Palisades, and improves upon fishing and boating opportunities. For fishermen or the fishing community, excuse me, the pier allows for a greater variety of water depths, which gives you more variability for fishing. We will work with DEC to talk, and the community, anyone who wants to talk about fishing, please reach out, but to provide for greater amenities. And I should point out that this L shape here is not like a final design. We'll continue to refine and look for ways to design the pier in such a way that it benefits fishing specifically. But it will get the fishing out of the CSO, which is obviously problematic. I think and I should reiterate the combined sewer overflow. So taking the fishing pier away from the sewage outfall. And the final thing I'll note is, as I said, the beach area is closed at night. That's just a standard parks operation for a lot of park spaces. But this is a 24/7, 365 manned space by Parks Marina unit. So you have staff here on hand all the time. The hours of operation are earlier and later at this site than they are at a typical park site. So this pier would be open for better hours for fishing, which we know fishermen like to be, our fishing community likes to be out there early in the morning, or dawn and dusk sort of thing. So there's a big benefit to co-locating with a staffed site. So that's the improvements for fishing. For boating, there's a good deal of benefit to having this pier as well. It takes care of that 20-person maximum issue with the current dock system. You can get as many people on this pier as the loading will allow, which is a very significant amount of people. Furthermore, it allows you to get out into deeper water, which I already mentioned, but when you're in deeper water, you can get bigger vessels, deeper draft vessels. The bigger the vessels you can get, the more robust programming options you have. You have more variability. The pier also becomes a better launch point for the eco dock. So this is where we're proposing the eco dock would be located. And the eco dock, again, benefits from having that additional capacity for pedestrians on the fishing pier, on the run to the eco dock itself. So the eco dock and the pier would obviously be different heights. If you think of an eco dock as sort of a medium height between a pier and a floating dock system. So one of the benefits of what we're showing is if you have a floating dock that's elevated about a foot and a half or 2 feet off the water, you have an eco dock elevated 3 or 4 feet off the water, and a pier elevated up at 6-7 feet off the water. You have all these different height points that different vessel types can pull up alongside. So shorter vessels, medium vessels, taller vessels, big sailing ships, water taxis, fishing excursion vessels, things like that. That variability of height gives you a greater variability in options for vessel types. And it makes the site generally more accessible. So you're not having users climbing up over stairs or really steep ramps to get up into vessels, so on and so forth. What we're showing here also with the pier would be the potential to build out a wave screen. And a wave screen is something we have at Boat Basin down at 79th Street, but it protects the site from ice flows, from debris, from vessel wakes out in the river. It would be a big benefit to the vessels in the Marina Basin. Hudson River Community Sailing, I'm sure, would appreciate that extra protection, and all the marina users would. In the same vein, what we're showing here, and this is kind of my final note on this slide, what we're showing here is we would look to replace our dock system that is presently timber with a new concrete system. And the benefits of that are that the concrete system is more resilient. You don't have to worry about deterioration and rot and borers like you do with timber in the water. It's also more stable, so you don't have to worry about docks rocking in wakes and waves, which is great for accessibility on the docks and just generally for user experience. And they're more robust in the sense that they can even deflect wakes to some extent because they're heavier, and they don't have to be pulled out of the water in the winter. Our present system, our timber dock system, gets pulled out of the water in the winter. These could stay in potentially year round, which allows for a longer range of span of months of operation, and it reduces cost items for the city. I do want to note too that you may see over time this presentation change where these docks scale up and down or removed in total. And that's because this is something that we in the Parks and Marina unit can build out outside of a capital project. So if we find out that we can't afford necessarily to build out a whole concrete dock system, then we may cut these out of the project, and we'll do that with expense funding later on. But we're showing you this to show kind of the vision of the site going forward. This is the ideal build out that we'll move towards as Parks continues to operate the site for the benefit of the local community. I also will note that there's this long run down here that you see that runs horizontal, parallel to the shoreline, would be for the dinghies. The dinghies that access the mooring fields to the south. So that's this slide. I also want to show the canoe club slide here. And if you remember, I mentioned that we're very happy that this can be kind of a light touch repair. And what that means is that this is a timber pier, right? Which is subject to at this time in New York City's history, where the water is cleaner than it's been at any time since the Civil War. You have marine borers returning. You have rot. The critters that eat wood are back. So working with timber is complicated. But because we're able to do the repair, we know that we can keep this thing up and running for the lifespan of the repair of 30 to 50 years with steel sistering, epoxy encasements of the existing piles, and so on and so forth in the water zone. But what we're also able to do, and we've talked about this internally in the city, is we don't typically work with timber on pier structures, but because this is a timber pier and the canoe club works with timber, they have carpentry skills and they've been doing this for 100 years. We're going to be able to do any decking work and repairs. We'll seek to do that with sustainable timber. I also would note that the bulkhead, which is unable to be salvaged, will have to be replaced. And because that's in water, similarly to the repairs we're doing under the pier structure, that'll be done in steel. And that will allow us to really shore up these kind of upland operation areas that the canoe club has. There's been load restrictions in this particular corner for a while now, and we'll clear that up. And we'll be coming to the canoe club when we get deeper into design on this to talk about the materials and the intended use and restoration of these upland sites, and so on and so forth. I should also mention that we'll need to do some ADA compliance work on the ramp entry point into the pier, into their storage area. And I think that's it for the scope there, but very happy we're not doing a reconstruction one on that reconstruction job on that pier, because it would be a real challenge to keep it in its for continuity of service and so on and so forth throughout construction with that kind of a bigger job. So that was the in-water scope I wanted to show. And the point of, I just want to reiterate the point of why we wanted to get that to the community board now and get it out to the community now is we want to move to bringing this to PDC and to DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation, to Army Corps to start talking about permitting now, so that we can kind of move a lot of the design work in parallel, but hammer out the budget for those in-water items, which will drive what we're able to do on the next slide. So I'm going to jump to the next slide, bearing in mind that we're going to have to come back to talk about this upland scope and to kind of scale it to the available budget that we have. But we're excited to show this though, because there's just so much potential to the street end area. And what we have here is a plan that kind of checks all the boxes and meets the items that we heard about from the community when we were at the community vision session, and that meets the POA items, and that generally just makes for a better site. So what you see here is there is a parking lot maintained. Again, that's for the concessionaire, the Hudson restaurant. They do have 7 parking spaces that are obligated to them under our license agreement. But the rest of the site is converted to somewhat of a plaza type area, and cars are kept out. That's the intent. We would be able to do that via a system of bollards or fences, and that's something that's to be determined. We'll be working closely with the parks landscape team and Ricardo and the parks in-house team to better refine the exact layout of this, but the concept is generally here. Wayfinding signage plan, again, is something we'll continue to refine and bring back. I do like, we have Stantec, the firm that we're working with, worked on the original Greenway plans for the park here. And I do love being able to, hopefully being able to kind of link these greenways together. Currently, they just sort of dump into the street end, and it would be great to visually link them. We do show a fence here, a 4-foot steel picket, so that the site can be closed, even if just, I guess, just symbolically. That's something that ops wanted, parks operations wanted to see, was the ability to close that site as needed. And then generally a plaza area, and then a get down to the beach, where we've really cleared out that beach and removed those historic structures that don't really serve a purpose, and just created a lot more sandy area for people to go down and enjoy, for kayakers to come down. What's on the design here that you're looking at is a sloped get down area with tiered seating made of, maybe a stone block, something like that. When I envision it, I think of Pebble Beach in Brooklyn Bridge Park, except it's a sandy beach instead of a pebble beach. And it would just have amazing views of the Palisades and out at the Hudson River. So that's generally the concept for the Upland site. But again, we're going to refine this some more, and we'll be back. Hopefully, we'll be back sometime in early 2023 to talk more about that. And then likewise with the palette of materials for the Upland site, these are kind of the standard palette for Manhattan. So we'll continue to look at these a little more closely, but just to give you an idea. Standard palette for the marina type structural items. This would be a steel sheet pile bulkhead for around the Inwood Canoe Club pier. We'll have to pick a sea rail to go on the new pier construction. And of course, all of our gangways and docks systems would meet ADA. This is a look at the concrete floating dock system that I mentioned in the marina. So it's a little different than the timber dock, more robust, a little heavier, a little more stable, and preferred in the modern marina development. Again, just some more materials to look at, the stone walls and cap from that existing retaining system at the entrance to Dykeman Fields. We'll see if we can mimic that when we're doing any kind of landscaping in the plaza type area. And then the tree planting palette is something that would be also refined further as we get deeper into landscape design. So the takeaway here for this presentation is to look at the marine work, the in-water structural work. I do want to hear any comments about the Upland area. Just to get feedback. I'm happy to take those comments. And we will look to go to DEC and Army Corps this winter, and we'll be back to you to report on kind of where that leaves the scale of the Upland scope early on next year. And that's it. I'm happy to take any questions.
Fantastic, thank you. So I just want to note that Naima Silver, who is our other public member, is now in the meeting. She heard most of your presentation. So I say that just to mention that we do have quorum. So we will be able to pass a resolution, but whatever it is that we do, we have quorum now. Before, as with the other presentation, before I go through the committee. I want to actually go through the public. So folks who are in the public who have questions, please raise your hands. I'm assuming that Inwood Canoe Club is probably going to weigh in on this. I do just want to make people aware. So the Q&A feature is something that only the panelists see, and in the interest of full disclosure and complying with the open meetings law, I have to basically read the questions or let people know what the upshot of people's questions are, so that everybody has the benefit of hearing those comments. Shout out to Dave Tom, who answered the question that I'm pretty sure we all had, but nobody actually asked, which is, why does SBS have authority over this waterfront stuff? That's been a head scratcher for me for a long time. It turns out, he said, true fact, SBS handles in-water construction because it absorbed the former Department of Ports years ago. I did not know that. That makes sense. Thank you, Dave. I definitely, I'm pretty sure I'm not the only person who was really perplexed by that. Somebody also, anonymous attendee, said this smacks of gentrification. And for anybody who shares that opinion, I just want to point, can you scroll back, Chris, to the 1935, 1937, and 1905 historical slides? I just want to, for anybody who missed that part of the presentation, Manhattan is an island, and it has a long and rich history of waterfront use. So it's been the work of this board and the work of this committee for, the 25 years that I've been a part of it, to try and reclaim that rich heritage. And we've been doing that with boathouses and waterfront development on both sides of the island. On the we've had more of that on the Harlem River side. And now it's really great to be able to have some of that on the Hudson River side. I don't think this is gentrification. I think this is a return to an important part of Manhattan's history. And if you look at this slide and all of the waterfront usage, this is bringing that back. So no, this is not gentrification. Julie McCoy from the Inwood Canoe Club asked if this presentation will be publicly available. Can I assume this is going to go up on the Parks Department website, or are we just gonna, I know you did share with me the slide deck. If it's possible to, can it be on, will it be on the Parks website, or can I just share it with the attendees, or how does that work? Because this has been super interesting, and I'm quite sure that people who were not able to attend the meeting, I mean, obviously they can go onto our YouTube channel and watch this whole meeting, but it would be great if there's a mechanism for sharing the slide deck. Yes, no?
Sure, thanks, Liz. I'm not sure what the standard, I have no problems with it being made public. I'm not sure what the standard operating procedure for parks is with these presentations, whether the CB, the community board, can hand them out, or whether they go on the website. Ricardo or Jen or anyone, do you all know how this typically gets handled?
We'll try to work it out.
Okay, because if it can be on the website, it would be ideal, because that's just a really easy way to direct people to it. But if I assume it's okay to send the slide deck to people who are, can whoever's got background audio, please turn it off. Thanks. I assume it's okay for me to share this slide deck with the people who are in the meeting now, like.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So Julie, I'm making myself a note to send it to you.
I mean, we have just made it public.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so I want to call on folks in the public in the order in which they raised their hands. Melissa Delaney Del Valle.
Oh, I was just saying, great presentation. Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Thank you, Liz. Thank you all. That's all.
Cool. Oh, the other thing that I just wanted to say is in terms of managing expectations on the meeting, of course, it's 9:03. So we're not ending the meeting at 9. I think it's very important to have a robust discussion of this. So I'm happy to let the meeting go on as long as it needs to. But I will ask for people to just keep their comments on point. If someone has said whatever it was you were going to say, to then, acknowledge that someone already asked your question. Louis Kleinman.
Unmute. There you go. Can you hear me, right?
Yep, we can hear you.
Hi, Nate and Chris. It's nice to see you virtually from June, and the presentation is really inspiring, and it's good to see that you guys are getting into public use of on-water abilities for the community. I represent, or at least I am part of, 2 different organizations, amongst others, one of which is the 100-man kayak group, which you guys are familiar with. Anywhere from 100 to 150 kayaks circumnavigating at the end of July. We had started from Tubby, but we moved it because of the parking situation. So, my first question is basically, will we be able to get 100 cars moving in and out of that parking area to unload our boats? Not to park the cars, but at least to have the space to unload the boats. The second group I'm asking about is the overwater swimmers. Have you envisioned any ability to have an organization do overwater swimming, either point to point across the Hudson or lap swimming for the community?
Thank you. Thank you so much for the question. I'll start with the first part of your question with the car scenario. So one of the things about this site that's interesting is that we go back to the existing conditions, but the street end as it is now is in a lot of ways almost redundant, except the exception of the parking that was currently available in the street end here. So you actually have like 2 turnarounds, right? You have a turnaround. I don't know if you guys can see my cursor, but you have a turnaround at the end of the street end, and then you have a turnaround under the Amtrak railroad. So the project would not impact the area under the Amtrak railroad. We still need vehicle access up to the Dykeman Fields. We still need vehicle access into the marina for vehicles to bring in boats on trailers and put them in. Also deliveries to the Hudson restaurant and to the park's operations there. So absolutely, this will be preserved for vehicles. You'll have a turnaround there, which makes for a convenient place for unloading kayaks or canoes or whatever vessels you wanted to put in at the beach for your programming. Furthermore, operationally, I would pivot your other question to Nate, who can speak more to parks operations.
Yeah.
Generally.
Yeah. Hi, Louis. Thanks for the comments. Hi. Yeah. And as always, Louis, you've inspired us to always do better. I mean it. I've been listening to your input for all my career. Swimming, we're not designing this for swimming, if that's the question. If you do have an interest in organizing some sort of swim event, there is a process for that. We've hosted we've hosted events like that at 79th Street Boat Basin. There's the Bridges to Bridges swim, I think you just mentioned. So, Morty Berger's not doing his thing anymore of organizing a number of these. There's the Little Red Lighthouse swim. So we can support those things if they're properly, supervised. And there's a physical plan for how that's going to work and necessary safety around it. But that doesn't, particularly figure in when we're designing a marina for boat docking. I mean, that could really take place almost anywhere, but if there was a proposal to do it off the docks there, we could support it given the plan satisfies all the safety measures that we require.
thank you. Jim. Marcinic or Marcinic?
It is Marcinic.
Marcinic.
First, I'd like to thank the Community Board 12 for all your participation and your hard work in all these efforts. Also, I want to thank the Parks Departments for all of their involvement in getting this done. I am a member of ICC. I do have a couple of questions that I posted in Q&A that I'll get to in a second. Well, I'll get to them now. You know, this new concrete eco dock that you have, or the concrete fishing pier with adjacent eco dock, I was just curious as to how much further out into the river this dock extends.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you for the question. Relative to the existing floating dock system, it's not totally clear at this exact moment, but it's something around 30 or 40 feet of additional distance out to the pier head line. If you're familiar, we're trying to get out to that pier head line to get about as deep of a water as we can possibly get.
Okay. Now, the reason why is, you know, we've been very respectful of the parks taking over the marina, and we've been keeping our kayaks out of the floating dock area for parking of boats. Looking at this new layout, I see you have that extension that goes out for the boats, which will service the mooring sailboats. And I'm just wondering if we'd be able to use some of that space within the shoreline to that extension of interior of docking. It's nice, it's good. You know, we do have youth groups that we have at the boathouse, and it would be very helpful that if we can shepherd them into a safe haven before we actually take them out onto the river to get them used to paddling and what have you.
Thanks, Jim. This is Nate. We can definitely look at that. I see the utility there. I do see the value of what you're saying. I think, you know, we've been conscious, and I do appreciate how you have been mindful of trying to respect the difference between, you know, some of the powerboat activities and the human powered boating activities that you guys support so well. And I think we're generally doing okay. And my staff could probably tell me more, but let's say this. You know, I think it's going to come down to the final design of this. If we can accomplish all of what we're proposing, I think what you're saying could be achievable. Again, it really comes down to boots on the ground and what staff are seeing, if it can be safely managed and we're not having conflicts between, you know, people trying to figure out how to get their paddle out of the water while a rib or a dinghy is trying to get to the dock, and there's a potential conflict there. So I don't want to just blind you with safety all the time, but that's really what drives these decisions. But we can consider that. I appreciate that. I'll be honest, I hadn't really thought about that, how that might be a nice protected space for some of the novices and people to get their footing before they get out into the water proper. So we'll give that a look.
Okay.
I think it's going to come down to the operations. Yeah.
It's something we can discuss at a future date. Being a member of the safety committee for ICC, you know, it's certainly, you know, safety is always the most important factor in all of this. Second point, I did ask a question, and it was actually referred to you, Nate. You mentioned your involvement with the Billion Oyster Group, how you looking to participate, or you have participated with them. Inwood Canoe Club actually had them there. We've have cages of oysters that we have off our dock. It was back in 2018, possibly 2019, certainly before, you know, the pre-pandemic. They're kind of dead at this point, but we have noticed oysters sprouting up along the riprap south of Inwood Canoe Club, which we're very excited about.
Great.
So anything that you can, you know, discuss with us with regards to this, we're happy to participate.
That's great, Jim. Yeah, and I stole, one of their alum, Billy and Oyster Project, and he was part of the first graduating class from Harbor School. Luis Melendez, who you'll see there every day. He's our supervising dock master on the day shift. I think he's on this, but he's not one of the presenters. So, but yeah, we'll follow up with you directly on that, Jim. Luis, this, he really is fantastic with this stuff, and he's been our bridge between really expanding our programming with the group. So if you're seeing stuff down there, or you'd like to revive, and Inwood Canoe Club wants to engage that more, we're more than happy to facilitate that. So if you can, if you want to go over to the marina, or, well, I've got your information, Jim. I'll follow up with you directly on this.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, Robert Burke. You had several questions, so if you could just sort of ask them quickly all at once and
Sure.
get
I put at the top, I'm not sure if it's the correct form for HRCS. It is, okay. So I want to start. Chris, can you just go over how the docks would be accessed from the fixed pier? What the gangway interaction between a new fixed pier there and the docks would be?
Sure. So the exact layout and logistics of the pier are something that we'll still refine, but the basic concept that you're seeing here is a node off of the pier that has an 80-foot ADA aluminum gangway that would run down to these concrete docks here to service the finger piers in this run of concrete dock, and then another likely 30-foot gangway. We could probably do better than that, but that's ADA to this run of docks to serve the dinghies and other types of vessels that would use that. So it's basically just a gangway system that comes off of a node that's built on the side of the pier.
But the node wouldn't interfere with like big wheelchairs and stuff getting around the kind of turns into the, our big adaptive program takes place on the northern part of that west facing dock, which would go away here. I'm just curious how Parks envision that to continue.
Sure. I think it's a good question. I think that it's maybe as a matter of scale with the picture you're looking at. All of the sorry, the phrasing isn't coming to me right away, but all of the paths that would be developed would meet ADA minimums. But to your point about using that or better, I shouldn't just say minimums, we always try to do better, but to your point about using that wider dock that's at the end of the current floating dock system for that purpose, that's a good note. That's something that we could look to mimic, perhaps creating like a wider zone somewhere on the concrete floating dock system, or otherwise trying to mimic that for the types of uses that the site gets. So I'll make a note of that, and as we continue to refine the intent, like the layout of this system, we'll look to provide something that serves that type of a use.
Okay, yeah, I didn't quite follow the last part of what you said. I'm just curious as to where we couldn't use the concrete dock at the end for our purposes. We'd have to use the floating dock with the slips, right?
You're asking about using the eco dock?
No. It's hard for me because I can't point it out, but
sure.
Currently we use the northern end of the floating dock with our Hoyer lifts to move people from the wheelchairs into the boats. That goes away in this configuration, and I was wondering where that would move to. Would it be that southern end of that floating dock, or was that? I just wonder if that came into any consideration.
Okay, so yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, Robert, thanks for the question. I mean, I think Chris answered it. I don't know what you said. You said that you appreciate the wider portion where you can do that sort of operation. We're saying we could likely mimic that.
No. Okay. Yeah, I'm not understanding the wider portion. I guess I'm not following what you're responding to. Right now, are you saying we would do it on the the dock that is going east-west? Well, running adjacent to the fixed pier?
If that's what you want to do, but I mean, it depends on the type of vessel. I mean, the eco dock certainly could support, a different range of vessels, particularly when you look at something like Impossible Dream. Might be better suited for that. But if you're talking about trying to maintain the programming you're doing now, you wouldn't be losing anything with this design. Would be, if anything, would be improving upon it. If there's a particular wider portion you want to leverage to support your programming, we can work as we get into the design aspects of that. We can certainly mimic that. It wouldn't be a change from what you're doing now.
I'm gonna jump in for a second here just to clarify something that I think has been implied but not made explicit. So this is a two-phase approval process. So unlike the basketball project where Parks made a presentation, this is our design, thumbs up, thumbs down, we thumbs upped it, so that's what they're gonna build. This is not that. This is a conceptual presentation for a scope and direction, and so that Parks can work with all of these many agencies on permitting, which is a very time-consuming process. And then the actual implementation and very particular specific design will come later and will be refined as a result of this conversation, and will then come back to this committee for approval of the actual design. Does that help?
Yeah, that's probably why I put it in the top. I don't know if this is the right place for me to ask the questions. The physical things here are such a radical difference from what we've been operating in, and I'm trying to understand all the impacts to the program that I represent.
Totally makes sense. So one of the things that I would suggest is, on the one hand, we have to have open and transparent conversation. On the other hand, this is a very in the weeds level of specificity that I don't think we need to do here. So it's appropriate for you to have raised that here so that it's a clear part of the public record that this is a concern that you have. And also I would suggest, and Parks has made, Chris has made clear that he can take that feedback into account for when the specific design is made. And it sounds like the next step of that piece is for you and Chris to have like a one-on-one conversation. So if you can swap contact information so that you can get into the very particular detail, that's going to inform his design for when they come back and present again to the public. So that way it's a good balance of, transparent conversation while also not micromanaging every single detail. Make sense?
I do, and I really appreciate as the last person said, all the work that you all do. And I will put my questions together and try to meet with Chris and try to get to some specifics. So thank you.
Fantastic.
Yeah, Robert, I'd love to wrap my head around the issue you're talking, because I think there's also the issue that I'm not as familiar with the use you're talking about. But let's definitely get together and discuss it to make sure that we can perpetuate all the good work that we've been doing and that you've been doing with the site.
Thank you. Okay, next up, David Tom.
Hello. Yeah, just want to echo thanks so much. Really great presentation, and really like what you're doing with the beach and that new pedestrian plaza area. It reminds me a little bit of the way the pedestrian plaza and the benches work at Muskota Marsh. And you may want to spend some time there and see how people use that space, because it's probably a good guide to, the amount of seating that you're going to want and how people are going to similarly sit here by the water and look out at the water. And it's entirely appropriate. This was a very strange, redundant piece of asphalt that actually only came into Parks possession fairly recently, in recent years. It used to be part of DOT because this was a mapped street that led to the ferry. And so when the ferry went away and this became parkland, this remained DOT property until I think in the late 90s when it finally got transferred to Parks. So by all means, looks great, restore the beach. put the pedestrian plaza in, and you may even want to double check on that 7 parking space obligation to the concession, because that wasn't actually in the concession license. There's no obligation to parking, and it's not in the court. It's not, and it's not in the court stipulation. So it may be something that's in a recent revision. I haven't seen any recent revision, but it's worth looking at. It was not in the original agreement, and if it is in the agreement, I'd love to get a copy of it.
Okay.
We'll double check. Thanks.
Okay, looking at some of the additional comments in the Q&A. Okay, Jim's question was, he asked himself about the oysters. Can you talk about the timeline on this? Because there are a couple of people who have asked questions about what is the timeline?
Sure. So we entered the design phase back in June, and we anticipate completing design December of next year. And then with a year of procurement, we would look to start construction in December or around winter of 2024. Winter of 23-24. So we're still a few years out from any shovels in the ground or any pile driving or what have you at present. So there's a longer time frame for designs on these in-water projects than a typical parks design. And we'll obviously keep the community board updated as on where we are with that as time goes on.
Okay, so wait a minute, let me see if I got that right. You anticipate design concluding in December of 23, procurement is about a year, so construction would basically begin in 25.
Yeah.
Okay. Which sounds like a really long time, but isn't. I mean, we've just seen what happens with this permitting stuff. And frankly, given that this is, I mean, I love this design, but it is a radical change. So I like the idea that the community board input and resolution process is one resolution that speaks to supporting the concept, and then a second resolution, I guess if your design is concluding in December of 23, I'm guessing 8 months from now, you're coming back. Well, we don't meet over the summer, so I'm hoping that we would be able to hear again from you at our May or June 23 meeting, so that we can have another resolution that speaks to sort of the more specific, the specifics of the design. There are a couple of comments in the chat from Ira Gershenhorn, who is really liking the beach, that removing the fishing pier really makes it attractive for swimming. That maybe needs to be balanced with the no swimming signs, or this may wind up creating an additional problem if swimming is not permitted and yet you have a beach. So just something to think about in terms of a possible enforcement potential issue. Alejandro is asking, Alejandro says he's the director of New York Open Water and would like to know how to host a swim from the boat ramp with proper permitting, safety insurance, etc., as you had intimated earlier.
Sure. You can reach out to me directly, nate.grove@parks.nyc.gov.
Okay. Alex, did you get that? I'm sorry, not Alex, Alejandro.
Either way works. Yeah, I got that, Nate. I'll get in touch with you. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. What else have we got? We answered that question about timing. Chauncey Young, who's been very active with waterfront issues, needed to sign off, but he thanked you for the presentation. Okay. Barbara, you got a question?
Yeah, a couple questions. One is, I don't understand, what's the gray, in the triangle that's there going out toward then the beach. What does that represent?
Sure.
You know,
In what you're looking at here, that gray, and can you see my cursor? Is this the area you're talking about?
yeah, there, and then going down and then going around and making that triangle.
Okay.
Don't go
Well,
down. Yeah,
yeah.
that area. Yeah, and then
Okay.
it's all gray, right? What is that?
Okay. Well, I'll answer your question, but I'll start by saying, and maybe that's a kind of an unfortunate like remnant in this particular image that you're looking at, but everything below this hashed line is not Parks property. So that's not in our scope. I think what you're seeing is an extension of a kind of a concrete. So that's
Yeah,
what's
it's the end
shown
of
here.
Dyson Street. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what's shown here, like a sidewalk concrete type of thing. But that's to be determined. That's something we need to revisit. The material, and I'm open to any suggestions or thoughts about materials for the plaza, but it's something that was selected for the purpose of demonstrating the potential of the site here today, not necessarily something that we've even spent a lot of time considering actually using. So if you have thoughts on how that plaza should work or could work, please let us know. But yeah,
It's currently a parking lot. It's
correct.
currently basically a parking lot.
Yes.
Well, no, it's currently a parking lot that nobody can actually use as a parking lot. So it's just like ugly asphalt.
It's a street, yeah, asphalt street end essentially.
Yeah, so but can it become part of your scope? Are you trying to get it in your scope, or is it just sort of not this time around?
Are you asking about the area below this hashed black line, or are you
Yeah,
asking about the
yeah,
area?
that gray triangle below the hashtag. Are you
That's
going to try to include it, or it's just not part of it?
that's not Parks property, so that's not something that we would include in our scope. That's
Okay.
something that would be, I believe, DOT.
Well, also to be clear, that area is not a parking lot. That area is a street turnaround. There's a little bit of parking just at the northern perimeter of it, but the area that's a parking lot is the area further west, closer to the river. That's the part above the hashtag line, and that is being turned into a plaza.
Right. I'm just saying, but that's constantly cluttered with cars, right? Okay, so now I understand. Okay, that it's not part of the scope. That was the main answer, not part of scope. Now, my next comment is, you're taking out the old fishing pier and then making the new pier. I wanted to say that the pier was not just used for fishing. It's a very popular viewing pier, and that people would go out and view on it. And I'm concerned that that use not be lost. I'm not sure if the new pedestrian plaza will fully supplant and give that opportunity of people to be able to just go down on an evening, watch the sunset, and so forth.
The new fishing pier is going to, if you look at the design, the new fishing pier is going to replicate all of the things that the old fishing pier offered, both in terms of fishing and viewing. I use that fishing pier all of the time, and I don't fish. I just hang out on it and view. So all of those things will still be built-in features of the new pier, and also the beach will have enhanced viewing opportunities and sunset watching and all of that, because the fishing pier that is there now won't obstruct the view of the river and the Palisades from the beach.
On the current old fishing pier, people would take chairs out with them, would take beach chairs out and sit there. You really probably can't do that on the concrete fishing pier. So they would really be restricted in that use to the pedestrian plaza, because the current, we'll call it old fishing pier, current fishing pier, people like to take beach chairs out there and sit and enjoy the evening And I don't know if the new pedestrian plaza would be the same kind of viewing and relaxing experience. So maybe, can you answer that, Chris? What do you think?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I really appreciate you advocating for that type of use. And I did touch upon it briefly in the presentation, but it does bear repeating. The views at this site are absolutely phenomenal. It can't be understated.
The pedestrian plaza.
Well, generally the site in general, but yes, the fishing pier as it exists has views of the George Washington Bridge, the Palisades, the Mario Cuomo Bridge. I do want to say that what we're proposing here with this fishing pier would extend deeper into water and have better views upriver than the current fishing pier, which is kind of hedged in by the trees on Dykeman Fields.
Yes.
Now, the beach itself, because of the nature of it being somewhat recessed behind the concrete structure here and the Dykeman Fields area here, your view is of the Palisades, and that's just the angle that you have. But I do want to say that if you enjoyed going out on enjoy going out on the current fishing pier as it is now, what you're looking at here in this proposal is a publicly accessible pier of a similar construction, similar concept. We'll look to do a similar width for that area out at the end of it that gives you a spot to sit and appreciate the sunset, appreciate the views. You're not going to feel as hedged in by the restaurant concession and the trees over in Dykeman Field. You're going to feel like you're really more out in the river. So I think it could end up being an improvement, but it should end up being an improvement, and you're certainly going to get a better view from the plaza space and the beach relative to what you currently have from the beach and from the street end space. But we'll continue to look for opportunities to improve upon that type of use out at the pier as we go forward.
Years ago, Time Out New York said
Barbara,
listed best sunset in New York City.
Yeah.
So you will, excuse me, Liz, so you will be able to take like a beach chair and sit out at the end of the concrete fishing pier. Chris?
If we can, yes. So if we can make space for fishing out at the end of that pier, we can make space for seating. Similarly to what you're saying, there should be enough room out there for that, for bringing out chairs. You're saying that's something that we'll continue to try to allow. And we'll look at making the width out there and the spatial arrangement of it as similar or better than the fishing pier that presently exists. And we'll do our best on that. And as we refine again, we'll be back more with that defined layout after we get through the kind of conceptual review for permitting purposes. But thank you so much for that.
Barbara, we've got a bunch of other questions, so I'm going to.
I'd like to finish, Liz.
No. Okay, so next we've got Jesse Krismer.
Hello. Sorry, I guess I was noticing around the Inwood Canoe Club, as you replaced the bulkheads, that left some opportunity for landscaping work that was called out there. I was kind of wondering what the extent of that landscaping was going to be. And then also, I know Nate cautioned us about talking about fences again, but how does that landscaping affect maybe the fences and the security of, all the boat storage that is there?
Thank you for the question. To your point about the storage that's there in that upland area, it's not really shown on this diagram, I realize now. But yes, it's a fenced in area that's part of the canoe club's agreed upon location to utilize. So what we would seek to do as we do the bulkhead, obviously there's going to be some spatial disruptions that we'll have to talk about, and I don't really know what that will look like yet. As we develop the design, we'll get a better sense of that. But the intent is to return what you have in the form that you have it, and we'll have conversations about exactly how you would want that to be returned to you. The planter beds and planting space that you're referencing maybe are these planting beds that exist. And I think the reason why they're shown is that these planting beds are kind of like constructed, kind of DIY constructed planter beds. And I doubt that there's a simple way to do this bulkheading and preserve them in their current condition. So we'll have to talk about what that means and how best to handle that going forward. The answer to your question ultimately, though, is as we kind of determine how the demolitions of the existing structure and the rehab of the upland space and like the refilling of it would work, we'll kind of get a sense of, you know, how much we have to, you know, to destroy in order to fix of that upland area, you know, if you know what I mean. So I don't really know yet, but we will be coming back to the canoe club specifically to hammer out those details.
Thank you. A couple of quick questions. Also a shout out to Inwood Canoe Club. It was mentioned before in the context of Heroes on the Hudson. They obviously were a major part of bringing that programming. So a couple of people from ICC wanted to make clear that they were a big part of that as well. Someone asked a question. There's been a lot of talk about the views, but someone asked, and it sounds like the piers and the beach will have improved views from the pedestrian standpoint, but someone asked about the extent to which the new piers would potentially change the view of the water from the perspective of the restaurant. So if you're in, you know, if you're in the restaurant concession, either inside or out on the beach tables, does this materially alter the view if you're a paying customer there? I'm not, I can't quite wrap my head around that, but someone did ask that in the Q&A.
Well, it's a good question and something that we're thinking about. We have, you know, the restaurant is a parks concession. We do work closely with the team that runs that restaurant, and they have, you know, gotten a sense for this concept. And they're generally supportive. I think I can say that. What we've found out through our investigations here is it seems like the pier elevation is not going to be that high relative to the existing elevation of the kind of marina surface area and the outdoor eating area of the Hudson. So it doesn't seem that the view, let's say, of the Palisades and the George Washington Bridge would be disrupted. Obviously, there will be a more active marina that they'll be looking out at, which may be of, you know, we think of benefit to the operation of the restaurant. So we're going to continue to look at that. There will be renderings involved in future presentations so we can get a better sense of all these view sheds. I did want to point that out relative to the beach as well, that we'll look to kind of develop those so everyone can get a better sense of how these things will play in relation to each other. And that's something that we'll come back to again as we refine our design after sort of conceptual approvals from all the entities we have to talk to. I also want to just jump back to the canoe club because I realized that last question involved the fencing as well. I don't anticipate a fencing change to the canoe club. We shouldn't have to do any excavation that deep back towards the greenway. So their fencing likely should stay the same as it is now, maybe with some ADA related changes around the gate access point.
Okay, and I did notice it's 4-foot fencing. So, will the marina be closed? Will the docks marina be closed during construction of the pier?
That's something we'll have to, you know, the logistics of the construction phase is something we'll get to as we get deeper into design, but it stands to reason it would be a challenge to keep them in operation throughout the entirety of construction.
Okay.
That's something we'll have to talk about with all the groups obviously who operate there, and we'll continue to message that, but we're not quite at that phase yet where we're figuring out the logistics of the construction phasing.
Okay. Okay, I think that addresses most of the questions that people had asked. All right, so committee, if everybody can turn on their screens so that I can see you and we can take a vote on this. Because It's getting late. But I'm glad that we were able to really have a pretty detailed conversation. And I have to say, I personally find this incredibly exciting. And I'm really impressed with the vision that you brought to this design, because this is very, very different than what I had in mind, but in a really good way. It does kind of all of the thing. I was really wondering, like, how were you going to do all of the things that people were asking for? And it's very often that the answer that we get is like, well, we can't do everything. We can do a lot of it. We could do most of it. Well, we just can't do everything. And yet this design seems to do everything that we asked for. So I find that to be pretty exciting. I know that Alexis and Naima are not able to go on screen because they're on their phones, and Danny is not able to go on screen. So I think that's 3, 4, 5. Barbara, if you could turn your screen on would be great. So it sounds like what we're voting on is not an approval of a specific design, but an approval of a conceptual design. And the resolution will have a bunch of whereases that detail the current conditions, the goals based on the community input over many years, and also the June meeting, and sort of hits the highlights of the design, the proposed conceptual features as you've described them, and delineates a couple of areas that need work, including, some of the very particular ADA issues, and to Barbara's point, really making sure that the new pier has the same physical scope to enable the same kinds of usages that are currently enjoyed now. And I think committee, tell me if there are other major points that I missed. Going once, going twice. And that we would, the resolves would be directed, the reso would be directed to parks, and I guess to parks and to PDC, and one of the be it further resolves would be directed to DEC and the Army Corps of Engineers with respect to permitting. Is there, and SBS. If you could email me a list of all of the agencies that should be included in that be it further resolved, so that we make sure that everybody that we want to issue permits actually issues permits. Does that sound good to people? Show of hands, nod, wave your hands, smile. Okay, so Mancita.
Sounds good.
Yes. Alexis, you're a yes. Naima, you're a yes.
Yep, yep.
Okay. Danny, if you could just come on. Okay, Barbara's a yes. Danny, I need a vocal or a visual. He texted me and said yes. He seems to be having, his hand is up. So that's a yes. Thank you so much. We're all struggling with our failing technologies and our failing tech. And Naima, did you want to weigh in for the record on the basketball, the 186th Street basketball? Naima? Wait. Are you there? There we go.
Hi, Liz, can you hear?
Yes, we can hear you.
Awesome. Hi, good evening. So yes, I would like to vote yes in support of it on the record for the 186th Street, the basketball project in Highbridge.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
I can share that Yeah, I can share that it's been a long time coming. There's been a lot of kids and families using that space in the conditions that it's been in for a long time. So the fact that we can invest in this and improve it is going to be just a great benefit to a lot of families in our community.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for your participation. This has been a long meeting, but a fruitful one. I personally am exhausted because I am still on Morocco time. So for me, it is 3 o'clock in the morning. Thank you to everybody for your participation. And I will happily accept a motion to adjourn. Anybody?
I second it.
No, I need somebody to make the motion.
Oh, I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Fantastic. At 9:49. And is there a second?
I second it.
Thank you, Mansita. All right, everybody. Thank you. And I will see you all at the general meeting.
Okay.
Good night. Thanks, Liz.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Thank you, everyone.